If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 140, Golden Saint Cloth. This is... Tetsu stared wide-eyed at the transformation happening before him. The robe had changed into something entirely new, leaving him at a complete loss for words. It's incredible, he whispered, awestruck. Bunte's expression was one of pride and satisfaction. His eyes gleamed as he looked at Kaminari, who was still frozen in place. Not bad at all. Dr. Tenma, standing beside him, nodded repeatedly with a proud smile. While he had tested the transformation countless times before, seeing the armor come alive on its rightful owner made the experience incomparable. Kaminari, the center of everyone's attention, was completely stunned. Slowly, he raised his hands to inspect the golden armor that now covered his arms, chest, and hands. Is this a dream? Am I dreaming? He murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief. For a moment, he felt like his life couldn't get any better. Not only could he use the electrifying moves he'd always admired from anime, but now he was wearing armor that looked straight out of a legendary saga. No, this wasn't just some random piece of armor. It was like having a golden saint cloth from his childhood fantasies brought to life. The suit had fully transformed into a stunning suit of golden armor. Every inch of it gleamed with brilliance, from the intricate patterns to its polished finish. The design was bold, sleek, and overwhelmingly cool. How does it feel? Dr. Tenma asked with a slight smirk. We followed your design concept to the letter. By the way, didn't you name it Cancer's Golden Cloth? Kaminari interrupted, clenching his right fist and gazing at the golden gauntlet now covering it. A wave of excitement coursed through him, making it hard to stay calm. That's right. So, among the researchers, we nicknamed this transformation Sacred Cloth Mode, Dr. Tenma explained with a laugh. But, why cancer? Tetsu asked, equal parts curious and envious. Because Kaminari-kun's birthday is June 29th, Bunteis said, matter-of-factly. Kaminari turned to him, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Wait, you even know my birthday, old man? Of course, Bunteis replied with a casual smile. If I didn't even know the birthday of the young man who saved my life, I'd be a pretty lousy person, wouldn't I? Well, I guess that makes sense, Kaminari admitted, scratching the back of his head. But yeah, the cancer theme was definitely inspired by my birthday. Of course, Kaminari knew there was more to it than just kindness. Bunteis had clearly done his homework. But given the older man's good intentions, there was no point in overthinking it. Anyway, what are the functions of this sacred cloth mode? Kaminari asked, eager to know what his new armor could do. In addition to the basic features of casual mode, this mode includes first aid, advanced defense capabilities, and a suite of auxiliary tools designed to support you in combat, Dr. Tenma began. Before he could continue, the AI Pikachu interjected, Master, let me explain. Kaminari grinned. Alright then, Pikachu, it's all yours. And from now on, let's stick with calling the two modes God Mode and Sacred Cloth Mode. It just sounds cooler that way. Yes, Master. Pikachu chirped, clearly excited. Kaminari's grin widened. Start with the first aid function. That sounds like something that could really save my butt one day. Yes, Master. Pikachu responded with its usual enthusiasm, mimicking the cheerful tone of its namesake. Master, the first aid system consists of 3 components, a hemostatic agent, a stimulant, and an analgesic. These are stored inside the combat suit and can be administered directly when needed. But keep in mind, the supply is limited to 2 uses before it needs to be refilled. Kaminari processed the information and glanced over at Dr. Tenma. The doctor, already anticipating his question, answered promptly. You can come back here for refills anytime, but each dose will cost 300,000 yen. These are highly specialized, genetically tailored medications that aren't available commercially. Got it, Kaminari nodded. The price was steep, but manageable. Before Kaminari could offer to pay, Mitsui interjected. Let's make it simple. From now on, we'll provide you with 3 doses free of charge every year. You can choose which ones you want. Anything beyond that will follow the usual pricing. That's really generous of you, but Kaminari started, feeling a bit awkward. No need to argue. Consider it an early birthday gift from me, Bunteis said with a firm but kind tone, leaving no room for debate. Thank you Mitsui-sama. Kaminari bowed deeply in gratitude. Beside him, Tetsu also bowed, his expression serious. Just call me old man, it sounds better. Mitsui chuckled. All right, old man. Kaminari replied, smiling warmly. As the group finished exchanging pleasantries, Dr. Tenma cleared his throat impatiently. We can test the remaining functions during the actual combat trial. Let's get started. Kaminari didn't hesitate. He stepped confidently into the arena, the transparent glass wall sliding shut behind him. The silence that followed made the room feel even larger, leaving only Kaminari and the 3 dark green combat robots in the space. Man, walking around in this feels different, Kaminari thought to himself. The armor was lightweight yet sturdy, giving him a strange but reassuring sense of security. Pikachu, activate scout mode. He commanded. Immediately, a pale yellow light formed a translucent display screen in front of his eyes. As Kaminari turned to face the robots, streams of data began to appear on the screen, providing detailed stats on each opponent. Even the location of their core energy sources was clearly marked. Whoa, this is insane! Kaminari marveled. Pikachu, can this analyze humans too? Yes, Master. Pikachu responded. If data is available, it will display immediately. If not, Scout Mode can perform a preliminary scan to gather basic information. During combat, it will analyze quirk usage and weaknesses in real time. Kaminari felt a wave of excitement wash over him. This wasn't just a combat suit, it was practically a portable tactical system. At that moment, Dr. Tenma's calm, authoritative voice cut through the speakers. Prepare yourself. The robots are activating now. Red lights lit up on each robot, signaling that the trial had begun. The battle starts now, Dr. Tenma announced coolly, his tone steady and composed. Chapter 141, Kaminari's Approval. Target locked. Eliminate. The lead combat robot, armed with 2 sharp green spears, roared to life, its tracks spinning at high speed as it lunged toward Kaminari with alarming velocity. The other 2 robots flanked from the left and right, moving to encircle him. So fast! Kaminari's eyes widened as he tracked the incoming machine. It closed the distance almost instantly, and he had to admit Dr. Tenma hadn't exaggerated. These robots were significantly faster than the ones he'd fought before. Crackle! Godspeed activate! Shua! In a flash, Kaminari's figure became a streak of golden light, narrowly dodging the incoming spear strike. He landed smoothly at the robot's side, his gauntlet fist gleaming with golden energy as he clenched it tightly. You've gotten stronger? Well, guess what, so have I. Lightning fist. Boom. A golden burst erupted as electricity surged from Kaminari's punch, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The force was so immense that it blew back his blonde hair, yet his confident grin stayed firmly in place. Gotcha! But as the smoke cleared, Kaminari's smile faltered. The result wasn't what he'd expected. The robot remained upright, its thick green exterior barely scratched. All Kaminari had managed to do was darken the paint slightly. Target locked. Eliminate. Another robotic voice sounded from his right. Kaminari whipped his head around to see the second robot charging, its left arm raised to block with a shield while its right arm a massive blade was poised for a lethal strike. Damn it! Kaminari cursed as he assessed the situation. These robots weren't just fast, they were unnervingly precise. Their movements, attacks, and even their rotations were smooth and efficient like metal predators with minds of their own. And their durability, it was leagues above anything he had faced during U.A.'s entrance exam. His punch, which he had fully expected to send the first robot flying, barely made a dent. Boom! The ground rumbled beneath him as the third robot took aim from behind, its arms shifting. What now? Kaminari's stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. The robot had morphed its arms into twin rapid-fire machine guns. Wait, they're using live ammunition! Tetsu shouted from the sidelines, his hands clenched into fists. He turned to Dr. Tenma, his voice rising in outrage. How is this just a test? Why would you include something like that? Dr. Tenma, however, remained unbothered, his expression calm. Just keep watching. You'll understand soon enough. Inside the arena, the sound of the machine guns revving up filled the air. Flames erupted from the barrels as countless bullets tore through the space between them and Kaminari. Be careful, Kaminari! Tetsu shouted, his voice desperate. But Kaminari didn't need the warning. His instincts were already screaming at him. The rapid barrage of bullets was too overwhelming to simply dodge with God's speed. His mind raced. He had to use a higher level ability. High voltage mode activate. He was about to push his quirk to its limits, hoping that the combined speed and raw electric force would help him weather the storm. But before he could act, Cancer's golden cloth activated on its own. Critical threat detected. Defense function engaged. What? Kaminari barely had time to process the words before the armor emitted a dazzling golden glow. Bzzzzzt. A shimmering, circular energy shield expanded outward, enveloping Kaminari in a protective barrier just as the storm of bullets struck. Pap 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 pap. The sound of gunfire echoed in the arena as bullets collided with the shield, shattering on impact. Sparks flew as the glowing barrier held firm, deflecting the relentless assault. This is the defense function. Kaminari muttered, staring in disbelief as the bullets disintegrated mere inches from his face. It's kind of like my Thunder Aegis. The machine gun fire continued for nearly a minute before the robot finally stopped, its ammo depleted. The ground below it was littered with glowing, copper-colored casings. Meanwhile, Kaminari noticed something strange. During the entire exchange, the energy shield had not only protected him but seemed to suspend him in midair as well. Okay, that was way too much, he muttered under his breath, still catching his breath from the near-death experience. His expression twisted into one of annoyance as the shield began to fade. You're done firing, right? The shield dissipated, and Kaminari felt gravity pulling him back down. At the same time, the other two robots charged at him again, their weapons gleaming with lethal intent. But Kaminari wasn't panicking. Instead, he smirked and took a deep breath mid-air, confusing his audience. What's he doing? Dr. Tenma asked, his sharp eyes narrowing as he noticed a faint golden glow gathering at Kaminari's mouth. Ha, here it comes, Tetsu said, grinning excitedly from the sidelines. Zzzt. In the next moment, Kaminari exhaled sharply, unleashing a brilliant golden beam from his mouth. Lightning Dragon's Roar. The golden energy surged forward, engulfing the machine gun robot in an instant. Boom! A deafening explosion followed as the golden energy consumed its target, leaving behind nothing but flames and debris. Did he just shoot electricity out of his mouth? Dr. Tenma exclaimed, genuinely startled. Why didn't he use this during the Hero Sports Festival? It's simple, Tetsu replied, crossing his arms smugly. It's a move he's only developed recently. Kaminari's aiming to be the strongest lightning hero out there. And let me guess, Dr. Tenma said dryly. You're aiming to be the hardest hero in the world. Tetsu grinned. Damn right. Inside the arena, the battle wasn't over yet. A sharp, high-pitched screech cut through the air, audible even through the glass. Kaminari's attention snapped toward the remaining robots as a faint hum filled the space. That sound. Tetsu gasped, his excitement building. That's Raikiri. Dr. Tenma instinctively stepped closer to the glass, his eyes fixed on Kaminari's hands. A dark golden sphere of energy had formed in his palms, crackling with electric intensity. So this is Raikiri, he murmured, awe creeping into his voice. In an instant, Kaminari activated high voltage mode, his body vanishing in a flash of golden light. Too fast. Mitsui muttered, squinting to track Kaminari's movements. In the blink of an eye, Kaminari reappeared behind the two remaining robots. Golden flames flickered around his armor, his blonde hair standing on end as if charged with raw energy. He looked like a super saiyan clad in golden armor. Kaminari turned his sharp, glowing eyes toward Dr. Tenma through the glass. The suit, it's incredible, he said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of genuine approval. Boom! Boom! Behind him, the two robots erupted into flames, their destruction creating a stunning backdrop of fire and smoke. Dr. Tenma watched Kaminari intently, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his lips. This kid! He muttered. Creating a combat suit for him might just be one of the greatest achievement of my career. Chapter 142, Such and Such. In Saitama City, the neon lights glittered against the night sky. In the square in front of an apartment complex, a vibrant fountain shot high into the air, scattering sparkling droplets like a rain of flowers. The water in the pool shimmered and swirled, shifting colors sometimes blue, sometimes red, and occasionally dazzling with a mix of hues. Passers-by stopped to admire the display, captivated by the sight. It was already 7:12 p.m. I can't wait to put on my new combat uniform. Tetsu said with a longing expression as he stared at the fountain, his excitement barely contained. You've been saying that non-stop since we left. Kaminari replied with an exasperated sigh. Ever since Tetsu had seen the design Kaminari had drawn for Dr. Tenma earlier, he had been riding a wave of enthusiasm. Didn't Dr. Tenma say it would take at least 2 weeks to make? You're not going to be able to wear it during the hero work studies, Kaminari reminded him. Hearing this, Tetsu's excitement dimmed momentarily. He glanced at the box Kaminari was carrying in his right hand, his envy plain to see. You're so lucky, Kaminari. You get to wear yours right now. You've said that countless times too. Kaminari groaned, rubbing his temples. But seriously, why haven't you put it on yet? You'd look so cool in your battle mode. Tetsu pressed, undeterred. I've told you before, pay attention when people explain things. Kaminari scolded, his expression deadpan. The combat uniform isn't something you can wear casually. Didn't Aizawa-sensei tell us that? Oh, is that so? Tetsu scratched his head, looking sheepish. I was kind of hoping I could wear mine all the time once it's done. His enthusiasm reignited. That marine-style coat you designed as part of the uniform is just so cool. Kaminari sighed. I feel like all you care about is the coat. Don't you like the white suit and alloy boots that go with it? Well. Tetsu hesitated, scratching his white hair. I've been wondering, why did you make it white? And why a suit? Kaminari glanced at his hair with a smirk and replied, because I think white suits you. And as for the suit, it's the standard look for a marine coat. It's sleek, it's sharp, and it's stylish. Don't you think so? But won't white get dirty easily? If it gets messed up during a fight, it won't look good, Tetsu said, genuinely concerned. You really don't listen to anything, do you? Kaminari muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. He, Tetsu chuckled awkwardly. Whenever he was with Kaminari, he let him take the lead, rarely thinking things through on his own. Kaminari sighed again and straightened his posture. All right, listen carefully this time. He took a deep breath and began to explain. The coat isn't made of the cis memory alloy like my armor, but it's still crafted from a rare material, something Dr. Tenma calls AF alloy. It's incredibly smooth, with almost no friction. It's so slick, bullets would slide right off it. In other words, dust, dirt, and other debris won't stick to it. So the whole white clothes getting dirty thing? That's not going to happen under normal circumstances. As for the suit and boots, they're not made of anything super rare, but Dr. Tenma said he'll reinforce them to be as durable as possible while keeping them lightweight. So in a way, it's like having an extra layer of protection over your steel skin. The more Kaminari explained, the more Tetsu's eyes lit up with excitement. He was finally starting to understand just how cool his combat uniform would be. I really can't wait to wear my new combat uniform. Kaminari froze mid-step, his patience snapping. Oh my god, you've said that like 7 times already. Fortunately, they soon arrived near Tetsu's home, sparing Kaminari from further complaints. As they parted ways, Kaminari finally enjoyed the peace of walking alone. Man, I hope Tetsu calms down soon. He was way too hyped today. I've got my own stuff to think about. He walked in silence, his thoughts drifting to the upcoming workplace experience. I hope choosing him was the right call. I just need to stay focused and make the most of it. Stopping in front of his apartment building, Kaminari looked up at the full moon glowing brightly in the sky. It reminded him of how he had felt before taking the UA entrance exam, nervous yet excited, unsure of what lay ahead but determined to give it his all. If that saying about how effort pays off is true, I should be fine, Kaminari murmured to himself. After all, I've worked so hard for this. When he got home, Kaminari couldn't resist showing off his new combat uniform. As he put it on in front of his parents, their reactions didn't disappoint. Son, are you saying this was made for you for free by the Mitsui Group? His father asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Even as a layman, he could tell the combat uniform was worth a fortune. Mom, I can't stop seeing gold. His mother said in awe, staring at Kaminari in his sacred cloth mode. Everything about him gleamed, the golden hair, the golden eyebrows, the golden pupils, and, of course, the golden armor covering his body. Even more ridiculous was the faint golden glow Kaminari had activated using Pikachu's lighting function. His entire body shimmered like a divine figure. It's true it was free, Kaminari said, holding back a smirk. But there's more to the story than that. And what's the reason? His father pressed, curiosity written all over his face. Well, it's a long story, Kaminari replied, scratching the back of his head. Then make it short. His father urged. Considering it involved a corporation as influential as the Mitsui Group, he wasn't about to let it slide. All right. Kaminari gave in and began explaining everything that had happened, from his encounter with Mitsui Bunteis to the events that followed. The story took about 15 minutes in total. I see. So that's why companies under the Mitsui Group have been reaching out to work with us, his father muttered thoughtfully. While he recognized this was good news, there was a hint of disappointment in his tone. To Kaminari, it was clear what was bothering him. His father was upset that the Mitsui Group's interest had more to do with Kaminari than with his own professional abilities. Dad, Kaminari said, smiling gently. You know, Mitsui-san actually praised you a lot. His father's head snapped up, his expression brightening instantly. Oh? What did he say? Mitsui-san said you're a bit inexperienced in some areas, but you're great at communication and that your management skills are solid. Really? His father asked eagerly, his face lighting up like a kid being praised by his teacher. Absolutely, Kaminari lied smoothly, keeping a straight face. In truth, Mitsui Bunteis hadn't mentioned his father at all, but sometimes a little white lie was worth it to make your parents happy. Of course it's true. He's the head of the Mitsui family, would I dare make something like that up? Ha 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 ha. That night, Kaminari's father couldn't stop smiling. Even as he hummed cheerfully while washing up in the bathroom, Kaminari couldn't help but feel it was worth it. Yet, as long as Dad's happy, that's all that matters, Kaminari thought to himself, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. After all, seeing his family smile was one of the greatest blessings in life. Chapter 143, Matagi Hunter? It was Sunday, 10 o'clock in the morning, the day everyone was heading to their respective internship workplaces. At Shizuoka Shinkansen Station, the entire Class 1A had gathered, their presence drawing a noticeable crowd. Nearly twice the usual number of passengers stood nearby, whispering excitedly as they recognized the students. Hey, isn't that Kaminari Denki? It's him. I didn't think I'd see such a famous guy here. Denki. Denki. Mom, look. It's Denki over there. And those kids, aren't they all from U.A.'s hero course? What do you think they're doing here? I have no idea. Does anyone know? Despite the stares and chatter, Aizawa remained completely unfazed. His half-lidded eyes scanned the students as he spoke in his usual calm, monotone voice. Everyone brought their combat uniforms, right? His words carried a slight edge, even though his demeanor remained characteristically indifferent. Ever since the USJ incident, Aizawa seemed to hold them to an even stricter standard. Remember, you're not allowed to wear combat uniforms in public. Keep them packed safely, and don't lose them, he instructed. Got it. Ashidomina, her lively personality shining through, practically bounced on her feet as she replied with enthusiasm. Her excitement mirrored Tetsu's from the previous evening, she was clearly thrilled about her workplace partner. Don't drawl, Ashido. Just say yes properly, Aizawa chided, his tone sharp. Yes, sir, she muttered back, pouting slightly before her attention returned to the crowd around them. Speaking of which, Kaminari's really popular, hey? It feels like people recognize him wherever he goes. Kaminari, who was carrying his suitcase, merely smiled politely at the crowd without saying much. Kaminari, Kyoka said softly, the place you're heading to sounds pretty far away. Is it near Mount Fuji? Yeah, it is. But honestly, it's not as far as Tokoyama's trip to Kyushu. I mean, if I were him, I'd just take a plane, Kaminari replied with a shrug, glancing at Tokoyami Fumikage, who stood silently nearby. Tokoyami, ever stoic, replied in his calm, deep voice, we have to pay for our own tickets if we fly. Ha ha ha, that's so blunt. Kirishima burst out laughing. All right, enough chatter, Aizawa interrupted, his serious tone cutting through their conversation. A quick reminder, be polite and respectful to the heroes hosting your internship. Avoid doing anything rude or inappropriate, or you risk being dismissed early. While such incidents aren't common, they've happened before in hero history. So don't test your luck. Aizawa's sharp gaze swept over the students, as if silently warning them all. After a brief pause, he added, "All right, you're dismissed." "Yes, sir." The Class 1A students responded in unison, their voices firm, drawing another wave of murmurs and admiration from the surrounding crowd. As the students began saying their goodbyes, Midoriya and Yurika hurried to catch up with Ida, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed. "Ida-kun." Ida stopped and turned to face them. "If you find yourself in a situation you can't handle, promise you'll let us know," Midoriya said earnestly, his expression filled with concern. Yurika nodded in agreement, her small eyebrows furrowing as she looked at Ida with equal worry. "We're your friends, aren't we?" Kaminari, watching the scene from a short distance away, let out a small sigh. He had already seen the news about the turbo hero Ingenium's grave injuries at the hands of the hero killer. However, Kaminari chose not to approach Ida. While they were classmates, he wasn't as close to him as Midoriya or Yurika were. Besides, Kaminari believed that what Ida needed most right now wasn't words of comfort, but quiet space to process his emotions. After all, Ida had always given the impression of being calm, disciplined, and responsible, a model student and leader. "Thank you," Ida said, his voice steady as he turned to give Midoriya a small smile. But as he walked away, heading toward the train to Hosa City, the smile faded, replaced by a shadowed expression. Soon after, the Class 1A students began to scatter, each heading toward their destinations. Kaminari stood silently at his assigned platform, carrying his combat suit box and wearing a Pikachu-themed backpack. The crowd's gaze and the occasional flashes from cameras didn't bother him much as he waited for the Shinkansen Express to arrive. Minamichuru County, Yamanashi Prefecture, close to Mount Fuji, he murmured, checking his itinerary. 5 minutes later, the express train pulled into the station on schedule, coming to a smooth stop in front of Kaminari. He didn't board immediately, though. He stood back and waited patiently for the departing passengers to disembark and for the cleaning crew to finish tidying the car. About 10 minutes later, the cleaning staff, dressed in light blue uniforms, exited the train with their equipment. Only then did Kaminari follow the rest of the passengers into the car. He placed his Pikachu backpack on the luggage rack near the car door. It only held a change of clothes and toiletries, so it wasn't particularly valuable. His combat suit box, however, was a different story. Unlike the mythical sacred cloth box, it couldn't fly back to him if it got lost. Carefully, Kaminari placed the box on the shelf above his seat. At the same time, a young man seated in the row ahead of him moved to store something wrapped in a long strip of black cloth on the same shelf. Clink! The box and the black cloth accidentally bumped into each other, producing a distinct metallic sound. Metal! Kaminari thought, his eyes narrowing slightly. Judging by the weight and thickness of the cloth, there wasn't just one metal object inside, it seemed to hold several. "I'll put this up first, then you can place your box," the young man said casually, his tone polite. "Sure," Kaminari replied, stepping back. As he did, he glanced at the man out of curiosity, but the glance turned into a double take. "Wait, who's this guy?" Kaminari's gaze drifted further, landing on the old man seated beside the young man. The old man's appearance was peculiar, to say the least. His black and white hair was tied back, and he wore a black leather vest paired with fur trousers and boots that looked hand-stitched from animal hide. His muscular arms were bare, the definition of his muscles visible even beneath the dim train lights. It wasn't just Kaminari who noticed, the other passengers nearby kept sneaking glances at him as well. "That's my grandfather," the young man said proudly when he noticed Kaminari staring. "He's Japan's most senior and strongest Matagi hunter." Matagi hunter. Chapter 144, Master and Backer. Kaminari blinked in confusion before guessing aloud, "Wait, is that a hero name? Is this grandpa a professional hero?" "Professional hero?" The young man in the black and white shirt froze for a moment before waving his hands dismissively. No, no. He's not a hero, he's a hunter." "You know, a hunter." "A hunter?" Kaminari repeated, intrigued. He didn't sit down right away, instead leaning slightly forward. "So, what exactly does he hunt?" The young man brightened at the question, clearly eager to explain. Even the nearby passengers perked up, their curiosity piqued. "The Matagi hunter is an old, Traditional profession, the young man began enthusiastically. It's got a history of nearly 400 years. My grandpa mainly hunts wild bears, but he also goes after wild boars and mountain deer sometimes. Did you know, we came all the way from Hokkaido just to hunt a bear that's supposed to be 3 meters long, T/N, reminds me of Golden Kamui. If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely watch it. Enough. The old man, who had been quietly dozing with his eyes half closed, suddenly snapped awake and interrupted with a deep, authoritative voice. Yes, sir, the young man stammered, quickly realizing he'd said too much. Scratching his head awkwardly, he gave Kaminari an apologetic look before turning back to his seat. So, a Mataji hunter who specializes in bears. Kaminari mused quietly, leaning back in his seat. Although the conversation had been cut short, he felt like he had a decent grasp of their situation. His gaze drifted toward the black cloth bundle. That must be their hunting equipment, he thought. His mind wandered to the train's destination, and he quickly pieced together a likely scenario. There aren't many forests with bears near Tokyo, the most famous one is the Aokigahara forest at the base of Mount Fuji. They're probably headed there to hunt that 3-meter bird. As the image of a towering, 3-meter bear crossed his mind, Kaminari felt a shiver run through him. Can they really handle something that big? He thought, glancing at the old man's rugged figure. If something goes wrong, this could turn into a disaster. Since the young man had said his grandfather wasn't a professional hero, Kaminari doubted they had any quirk-based backup. The whole thing felt dangerously risky. Still, Kaminari didn't have the habit of interfering in other people's business. He could only wish them luck and chalk the experience up as a new bit of knowledge about traditional professions. 4 hours later, the train finally arrived at Kaminari's destination. The hunter duo had already disembarked at the previous stop. As Kaminari stepped out of the station, a cool breeze swept past him, instantly refreshing his tired body. Ah! He took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. No wonder this place feels so different. The air here is way fresher than in the city. His gaze drifted upward to the east, where a snow-capped mountain loomed in the distance. Mount Fuji, he murmured, a sense of awe washing over him. The mountain's majestic presence, framed by the clear sky, gave it an almost sacred aura. Kaminari couldn't help but admire its beauty. Haha, looks like I'll get to see this view every day for the next week, he said, shaking his head with a chuckle. Remembering why he was here, Kaminari shifted his focus. All right, time to meet my host. Didn't they say someone would come to pick me up? Standing at the station exit, Kaminari scanned the area. The town was quiet, peaceful even. There were few cars on the road, and most of the locals rode bicycles. The serene atmosphere made it feel like time had slowed down. But after nearly 20 minutes of waiting with no sign of anyone, Kaminari began to grow restless. Did they forget about me? He muttered, shifting the weight of his Pikachu backpack and combat suit box as passers-by shot him curious looks. Just as the thought crossed his mind, a deep voice spoke behind him. I didn't forget. I was just waiting to see how long it would take you to notice me, Kaminari Denki. The moment Kaminari heard the voice, his entire body tensed. A faint spark of yellow electricity crackled from his fingertips. What the? He spun around, instinctively retreating a few steps. Only when he stopped did he finally get a good look at the speaker. Edge shot. Standing before him was a man wearing a blue mask. His grey hair spiked outward in several sharp angles, completely covering one of his eyes. His outfit resembled something out of a ninja movie, with a mix of blue and red fabric that added to his intimidating presence. It was none other than the number 5 hero on Japan's hero billboard chart, Ninja Hero, Edge Shot. I'm disappointed, Edge Shot said coolly. I stood behind you for 10 whole minutes, and you never noticed. Your awareness is far too weak. Although Kaminari felt a little indignant, he knew arguing would get him nowhere. Bowing slightly, he offered a polite, albeit sheepish, response. My apologies. Still, the encounter left him deep in thought. His lack of perception was clearly a weakness. If only I could develop something like Enel's mantra, Kaminari mused silently, thinking of ways to improve. Let's go, Edge Shot said abruptly, turning on his heel and walking toward the street. I'll take you to the camp. Kaminari quickly followed, his head low. He couldn't shake the slight unease lingering in the air, but he didn't dare ask questions just yet. What Kaminari didn't know was that Edge Shot, the stoic and intimidating hero, was hiding his own embarrassment. Phew, Edgeshot thought to himself. Good thing he didn't realize I was actually 10 minutes late. In truth, the veteran hero had gotten carried away with early morning training and had left much later than planned. He'd rushed over at twice the speed of sound to make it in time. After arriving, he'd taken a few extra minutes to adjust his hair and outfit, figuring a little tardiness wouldn't hurt. Now, as the two walked silently through town, the atmosphere was undeniably awkward. Neither of them were the talkative type, so the tension hung heavy in the air. Why me? Edgeshot suddenly broke the silence, his deep voice cutting through the stillness. Hey! Kaminari looked up, momentarily confused. There must have been plenty of other heroes who invited you. Some of them are even ranked higher than I am, Edgeshot said plainly. Your performance at the sports festival was outstanding. Why choose me? Ah, that. Kaminari tilted his head thoughtfully before replying. I've thought a lot about this decision, he said with a smile. And? Edgeshot pressed, his tone curious but calm. Why me? Well. Kaminari paused for a moment, then answered confidently, because you're the best fit for me. Edgeshot raised an eyebrow beneath his mask. No matter how famous or powerful other heroes might be, Kaminari continued, his voice steady, if they're not the right match for me, it doesn't matter. What I want is to learn from someone who can help me grow into my own strengths. I don't care about fame or clout. That's meaningless to me. Kaminari's golden eyes gleamed with determination as he finished. I'm not looking for a backer. I'm looking for a master. For a moment, Edgeshot said nothing. Then, the corners of his mouth lifted into a subtle smile, hidden beneath his mask. Well said, he murmured, his voice filled with approval. Chapter 145, Racing. Where exactly are we going? Kaminari followed Edgeshot out of the small town. They were no longer on paved streets, there were no pedestrians in sight, and even the sparse buildings had disappeared. The cement road beneath them had given way to dirt. We're heading to camp, Edgeshot replied calmly, his tone as steady as ever. How far is this camp from here? Kaminari asked, a touch of helplessness creeping into his voice. At this pace, about 2.5 hours on foot, Edgeshot replied matter-of-factly. 2.5 hours. Kaminari stopped in his tracks, staring in disbelief at the hero's back. Glancing ahead, he realized they were heading straight for a forest. Wait, don't tell me, this camp is literally a camp in the forest. That's right. Edgeshot nodded as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He glanced back at Kaminari, who stood frozen in realization, and added, why else would it be called a camp? Kaminari sighed deeply, muttering under his breath, you've got a point. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The atmosphere returned to its earlier silence as they continued walking. Regretting it already? Edgeshot asked without looking back. No, not really, Kaminari replied, shaking his head. It's just, we only have a week, and spending hours just walking feels like such a waste of time. Calm yourself, Edgeshot instructed, his tone unwavering. Even walking is a form of training. It's not meaningless. Focus on the sensation of leaving the city behind and immersing yourself in nature. Got it. Taking a deep breath, Kaminari adjusted his perspective. As his gaze drifted toward the distant forest, he resigned himself to the journey. Well, no use complaining now. I just have to go with the flow. For nearly an hour, the two walked quietly. By this point, they were surrounded by dense vegetation. Shrubs and tall grass dotted the landscape, and the occasional rustle of small animals broke the monotony. The air was alive with the sounds of insects and birds, making the trek feel like an escape into another world. The further they went, the harder the terrain became. Kaminari, Edgeshot suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. He was carefully clearing a path through the trees. You know a move that lets you move at high speed, don't you? Kaminari nodded, curious where this was going. Good. Let's turn this into a game or race, Edgeshot said, stopping to turn and face Kaminari directly. A race? Kaminari raised an eyebrow. Yes. Since you said my style suits you, you must know that I'm also skilled at high-speed movement, Edgeshot said, his calm expression betraying a flicker of excitement. So, what? You want to race me? Kaminari asked, his tone half-joking. I don't even know where the camp is. How are we supposed to race? Edgeshot didn't seem fazed, That's one of the challenges you'll have to deal with. If you're slower than me, just try to keep up. But if you overtake me, you'll need to watch my position and adjust your pace accordingly. Once we're close to the camp, you'll be free to race ahead without holding back. Edshot's eyes glimmered with anticipation. For a moment, Kaminari thought he caught a hint of excitement in the usually composed hero's demeanor. All right, is it just a race, then? Kaminari asked, wanting to clarify the rules. If that feels too dull, let's add another rule, Edshot said, a faint smirk playing at the corner of his lips. The one behind is free to attack the one in the lead. However, the leader can only dodge, they aren't allowed to counterattack. With that, the game had taken on a more interesting twist. Now we're talking. Kaminari grinned, his competitive spirit igniting. After all, his opponent wasn't just anyone, it was Edshot, the number 5 pro hero in Japan. When do we start? Kaminari asked, his body tensing in anticipation. Now. Shoo. Before Kaminari could react, Edshot vanished, leaping onto a tree trunk and racing ahead with incredible speed. Seriously? Kaminari shouted, startled. You're the number 5 pro hero, and you still resort to sneaky starts. Bzzzzzt. Godspeed activate. Golden electricity surged through Kaminari's body as he turned into a streak of light, darting after Edshot along the tree trunks. It wasn't long before he caught sight of the hero again. But as Kaminari observed Edshot's movements, something struck him as oddly familiar. Wait a second. Kaminari muttered, narrowing his eyes. Why does the way he's running look so familiar? Then it hit him. That's the ninja run from Naruto. Arms back, leaning forward, it's exactly the same. It was true. Edshot leapt from tree to tree with practiced grace, his movements resembling a scene straight out of an anime. Didn't people prove this running style was inefficient? Kaminari thought, suppressing a laugh. But instead of judging, it only heightened his interest in the training to come. Edshot, what you just did was cheating, Kaminari teased as he caught up to the hero. This isn't school, Edshot replied sharply. And I'm not your classmate. Don't expect fairness outside the classroom. Got it, Kaminari muttered, his tone serious. Edshot's words struck a chord. The world outside UA didn't care about fairness or playing by the rules. It was a harsh reality he needed to face, and this internship seemed determined to hammer that lesson home. Is this your full speed? Edshot asked suddenly, his tone calm but laced with challenge. Not even close. During your battle with Todoroki at the sports festival, you moved far faster than this. Show me that speed, many times faster than you are now. Hearing this, Kaminari smirked. He wasn't about to let a little goading affect him. He wasn't some naive kid who fell for obvious provocations. Want to see me go faster? Kaminari called out. Then you'd better show me your top speed first. Edshot chuckled under his breath. He was starting to like Kaminari more and more. Without another word, he activated one of his signature techniques. Ninjutsu, thin body, quick step. Kaminari's eyes widened as he saw Edshot's body visibly shrink, his form becoming sleeker and more aerodynamic. Boom! A sonic boom echoed through the forest as Edshot shot forward like an arrow, his speed breaking the sound barrier in an instant. So fast! Kaminari's golden eyes narrowed as he tracked the streak of movement. The air rippled with Edshot's passage, a clear indication of just how far he'd pushed his speed. All right. Kaminari muttered, licking his lips. A spark of determination flashed in his gaze. If that's how we're playing, then it's my turn to get serious. High voltage mode activate. Crackle. Golden electricity surged around Kaminari as his body lit up like a beacon. If anyone had been watching from above, they would have seen a streak of golden light tearing through the forest, rapidly closing the gap between Kaminari and Edshot. At that moment, the race had truly begun. Chapter 146, Discussion. So fast. Edshot darted between the tree trunks with incredible agility. Although he didn't bother to turn his head, his sharp senses easily detected Kaminari's rapid approach. The faint crackle of electricity and the golden light trailing behind the boy were hard to miss. Amazing, truly an impressive young man, Edshot thought to himself. As a hero ranked in Japan's top 10, he could confidently say that the speed Kaminari was displaying had already surpassed at least 70% of professional heroes. Shoo! Suddenly, Edshot, in his elongated paper-thin form, twisted to the left in an almost unnatural motion. A fraction of a second later, 10 golden threads of electricity shot past where he had been, crackling as they embedded themselves in a thick tree trunk ahead. The impact left faint, singed marks on the bark. He dodged it. Kaminari, still chasing behind, was stunned. He wasn't surprised that Ed's shot had avoided his miniature lightning dragon's roar. After all, this was the number 5 pro hero. What shocked him was how the man had dodged. Ed's shot's maneuver wasn't just a simple sidestep or jump. It was as if his entire body had suddenly shifted a meter to the side without losing any forward momentum. That wasn't his quirk, Kaminari thought, his mind racing. It's some kind of advanced movement technique. Something done purely with skill. Excitement flickered in Kaminari's eyes as he continued to close the gap. I have to learn how to do that. But first, he had a race to win. Crackle. Determined, Kaminari pushed his high-voltage mode to its maximum limit. The golden light around him grew brighter, and his speed increased even further, leaving a brilliant trail behind him like the tail of a comet. At that moment, he had fully transformed into a golden meteor. Shoo! 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 As he closed the gap to less than 10 meters, Kaminari began firing streams of golden electrical current from his mouth, aiming to disrupt Ed's shot's momentum. Damn it, Kaminari muttered under his breath. This game has too many rules holding me back, not just the ones about not attacking full force, but even the environment itself. He wasn't afraid of hurting Ed's shot. No, the real issue was the forest. Kaminari knew full well that using a concentrated, high-temperature attack like the lightning dragon's roar here would be a disaster waiting to happen. One stray blast could ignite the lush vegetation around them and turn the entire area into an uncontrollable inferno. Meanwhile, Ed's shot's movements remained smooth and precise as he continued to evade the incoming golden currents. He dodged with uncanny grace, weaving through the forest with a rhythm that made it look effortless. But Kaminari's attacks weren't entirely in vain. While Ed's shot was able to avoid the streams of electricity, the act of dodging slowed him down, allowing Kaminari to close the distance even further. Electrified fist. Kaminari seized his chance. With a burst of speed, he appeared directly behind Ed's shot and launched a punch cloaked in golden lightning. Shoo! But just before Kaminari's attack could connect, Ed's shot's body twisted into an S shape, bending like a snake. His flexible form easily slipped past the punch, and with a swift motion, he repositioned himself behind Kaminari. This kid's whole body is coated in electricity, Ed's shot thought, observing Kaminari carefully. That makes him tricky to handle up close. If not for the crackling golden aura surrounding Kaminari, Ed's shot would have already neutralized him by restraining his arm or locking him in place, a technique he frequently used when facing villains. But let's see what else he's capable of, Ed's shot murmured to himself. Reaching out as he moved, Ed's shot plucked a handful of leaves from a passing branch. Ninja technique, leaf shuriken, he muttered. With a quick flick of his fingers, he sent 4 leaves flying through the air like projectiles. They zipped toward Kaminari, targeting him from 4 different directions, above, below, left, and right. Shoo! 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 The sound of the leaves cutting through the air reached Kaminari's ears, but he didn't have time to react. Pop! 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 The leaves struck Kaminari's golden aura but burned to ashes the instant they made contact. What was that? Kaminari muttered, confused. He'd felt the briefest resistance but hadn't seen anything significant. Ed's shot, on the other hand, frowned slightly. They burned. As impressive as his leaf shuriken technique was, the fact remained that they were still just leaves. Against the high-temperature electric field surrounding Kaminari, they had disintegrated the moment they touched him. So, that golden aura isn't just for show, Ed's shot thought. It offers both offensive and defensive capabilities. This boy really has crafted a unique and versatile move. His gaze sharpened as he watched Kaminari charge forward once again. Eraserhead was right to call him a genius. Still, despite Kaminari's ingenuity, Ed's shot couldn't help but notice the gaps in his technique. His quirk usage is exceptional, Ed's shot thought as he moved alongside the boy. But his body control is lacking. Kaminari's movements were powerful, but they lacked finesse. He was like a rocket, relying solely on brute thrust to move in a straight line. His speed is excellent, but his flexibility leaves much to be desired, Ed's shot mused. It's clear his physical training hasn't caught up to his quirk mastery yet. As he pondered Kaminari's shortcomings, Edshot's mind drifted back to something the boy had said earlier. So that's what he meant by suitable, Edshot realized. Kaminari hadn't chosen him just because he was a high-ranking hero. He had chosen him for his specific skill set, his mastery of precision and technique. He knows where his weaknesses lie, Edshot thought, a sense of admiration growing in his chest. And he's determined to address them by learning from someone who can help him improve. That's why he said he was looking for a master, not a backer. Edshot's lips curled into a faint smile as he glanced at the streak of golden light ahead of him. To have such clarity of thought and maturity at his age. Chapter 147, Camp. From a satellite view, the lush Aokigahara forest, commonly known as the Sea of Trees, sprawled like a green crescent at the southwestern base of Mount Fuji. Deep within the forest, two streaks of light, one golden, the other silver, raced through the trees, colliding with explosive force as they clashed at high speeds. Boom! Boom! Each impact sent shockwaves through the air, the sound reverberating with rapid intensity. Kaminari, currently the golden streak, was flung backward by yet another powerful strike from the relentless silver figure behind him. As he steadied himself mid-air, his mind raced with confusion and frustration. What's going on? Why isn't Edshot affected by my electricity at all? Although their duel had only lasted a short time, the sheer speed of both combatants meant they'd already exchanged numerous blows. But what puzzled Kaminari most was how Edshot remained unaffected by his high-voltage mode. The golden electric flames surrounding Kaminari's body, which should have deterred any close combatant, didn't seem to faze Edshot in the slightest. Each time the hero lashed out, whether by stretching his paper-thin limbs or darting in for a direct hit, his body inevitably made contact with Kaminari's electrified aura. Yet, aside from the occasional flicker of sparks on his silver form, Edshot's movements remained smooth and unaffected. Boom! Another elongated paper limb struck Kaminari, sending him flying. Sparks of golden electricity climbed up the extended limb, briefly lighting up Edshot's body. Zap! This time, Edshot let out a faint grunt from the jolt, but his expression remained calm, and his attacks continued as if nothing had happened. Damn it! Kaminari cursed as he regained his footing mid-air, balancing himself just in time to avoid crashing into a tree. The situation was frustrating. He's not just ignoring my electric shocks, Kaminari muttered to himself, but every attack he throws lands like it's guided, like some sort of homing missile. No matter how I dodge, he still connects. His back and shoulders ached from repeated impacts. The force behind Edshot's blows was no joke, each hit felt like getting slammed by a speeding freight train. And yet, despite having countless opportunities to pass him, Edshot remained just a meter behind Kaminari, deliberately holding back. Why doesn't he overtake me? Kaminari thought, gritting his teeth. He could feel Edshot's presence lingering just out of reach, like a shadow. Even when Kaminari slowed down, Edshot mirrored his pace, refusing to take the lead. It was as though the pro hero was intentionally staying at his heels, keeping the pressure on without finishing the race. Unbeknownst to Kaminari, Edshot had his reasons for holding back. Though his calm expression betrayed nothing, the hero was reaching his physical limits. Kaminari's electric aura wasn't something he could simply ignore, it was a constant assault on his body. Every strike, every close encounter, left Edshot enduring sharp, stinging jolts of electricity. It wasn't immunity that kept him moving, it was pure endurance. Years of training and discipline allowed him to push through the pain, but even he had his limits. I can't take too many more of these shocks, Edshot thought to himself, his movements still precise despite the strain. But there was a lesson he wanted Kaminari to learn, one that couldn't be taught through words alone. At the beginning of their clash, Kaminari had shown a dangerous overconfidence in his electric aura. He'd relied entirely on its defensive and deterrent properties, neglecting to evade attacks altogether. Edshot had deliberately continued his relentless assault to drive the point home, not everyone will fear your electricity. If I were wielding a blade instead of fists, Edshot thought, this battle would have been over before it started. He'd be lying in a pool of his own blood. Edshot hoped to instill a crucial lesson, Kaminari needed to use his speed not just for offense, but also for defense. His high-speed capabilities were wasted if he didn't dodge attacks when he had the chance. Let's see if he's starting to figure it out, Edshot thought as he adjusted his movements, temporarily pulling back on his attacks. Kaminari, noticing the sudden change in pace, furrowed his brows. Why isn't he attacking anymore? Before he could dwell on it, Edshot's voice rang out from behind him. We're here. Kaminari's gaze shot forward, and for the first time, he spotted their destination, a compact camp nestled in a clearing. The camp was simple yet well constructed, consisting of wooden buildings surrounded by high wooden walls. While it wasn't massive, it was more than spacious enough for 2 people. But before Kaminari could get a good look, a sharp sound whistled through the air. No way! Kaminari's eyes widened. He recognized that sound instantly. It was the distinct noise of Edgeshot stretching his paper-thin limbs. Instinctively, Kaminari attempted to dodge, but, as always, Edgeshot's precision left no room for escape. A thin, paper-like arm snaked out, wrapping around Kaminari's ankle and yanking him off the tree trunk. What? Kaminari yelped as he was thrown to the ground. Thud. He crashed onto the forest floor, rolling several times before finally coming to a stop. His combat suit box flew from his grip, landing a few feet away. Damn it! Kaminari groaned, lying flat on his back. Above him, the dense canopy of trees let in fragments of sunlight, casting dappled shadows across the ground. First, he warns me we're close to the destination, Kaminari muttered bitterly. Then, just as I let my guard down, he throws me off the course. He let out a resigned sigh, staring up at the fragmented sky. Is he trying to teach me not to get distracted by my opponent's words? After a moment, Kaminari pushed himself to his feet, dusting off his clothes. Picking up his fallen combat suit box, he trudged toward the camp. There was no point wasting any more energy. He'd already lost the race, so he deactivated his high-voltage mode to conserve what stamina he had left. There's no way I'm wasting what's left of my charge. Who knows if this camp even has proper electricity? Kaminari thought wryly. Soon, Kaminari arrived outside the camp's wooden walls. To his surprise, he couldn't find a gate or entrance anywhere. Hey! Kaminari muttered, looking around in confusion. Where's the door? Before he could start circling the perimeter, a familiar voice called out from above. What are you doing down there? Hurry up and get inside. Kaminari looked up to see Edgeshot standing atop the wooden wall in a crouched ninja stance. Where's the entrance? Kaminari asked helplessly. There isn't one, Edgeshot replied flatly. Just jump over. Kaminari stared at him, dumbfounded, before letting out an exasperated sigh. Fine, fine, you win, he muttered, a small spark of electricity crackling around him as he prepared to leap. You really don't make this easy, do you? Chapter 148, Work-Study begins. Kriaak. In the middle of the forested camp, the wooden door of a traditional Japanese cabin groaned open. Ha! Kaminari stepped out, only to be greeted by a refreshing wave of crisp, moist morning air. He paused at the threshold, inhaling deeply. The coolness of the forest breeze invigorated him in an instant. This air, it's even better than Omiya Park, Kaminari thought with a small smile, his gaze fixed ahead. Taking a step forward, he carefully closed the door behind him, all the while admiring the scenery that stretched before him. The jade fan hangs upside down over the sky of the east, the white snow on Fuji reflects the rising sun. The lines of a poem he'd studied in junior high came to mind as he stood there, captivated by the view. For the first time, he felt the weight of what it meant to experience something truly poetic. Mount Fuji, majestic and pristine, stood towering in the distance, bathed in the warm hues of morning light. The idea of stepping outside and seeing Mount Fuji every morning, it's amazing, Kaminari murmured to himself, his voice laced with awe. I've got to bring my parents here someday. They'd love it. But his peaceful musings were abruptly shattered by a calm, steady voice that pierced through the stillness. Good morning, Raikiri. Startled out of his thoughts, Kaminari turned to see Edgeshot stepping out of another cabin nearby. He looked just as composed as always, his appearance unchanged from the day before. Good morning, Edgeshot, Kaminari replied politely. He stuck to using the hero's title rather than his real name. After all, Aizawa had made it clear to them before they departed, when working with professional heroes, it was proper etiquette to address them by their hero name. Edgeshot glanced toward Mount Fuji in the distance. Since you're up so early, I take it you've already mastered the breathing technique I showed you yesterday. His voice was calm, almost conversational. The breathing technique wasn't too difficult, so I picked it up pretty quickly, Kaminari replied with a smile. But honestly, getting up early is just a habit for me. I've been waking up at this time for over 10 years now to train for an hour or two. Edgeshot nodded slightly, a hint of approval in his gaze. The evening before had been relatively uneventful. Kaminari and Edge Shot had gone to a nearby lake and caught 2 fresh fish for dinner. Their meal was simple: grilled fish, pre-packaged miso soup, and freshly steamed white rice made with water from Mount Fuji. Though plain, it was surprisingly satisfying. Kaminari couldn't tell if it was the freshness of the ingredients or his hunger after the long day, but it felt like one of the best meals he'd ever had. After dinner, Edge Shot didn't immediately put Kaminari to work. Instead, he introduced him to the camp and laid out the daily routine he'd be following. The camp itself was straightforward. It was enclosed by 4 high wooden walls, without any gates, as Kaminari had already discovered. The western side, where they were now, was the living area. It featured 5 wooden cabins in total, each built in the traditional Japanese style. 2 of the cabins were designated for living quarters, 1 for each of them. The others served as a kitchen, a storage shed, and a small bathroom. The kitchen doubled as a dining area, though calling it a dining area was a stretch. It consisted of a single wooden table on a tatami mat, large enough to seat 4 people at most. Despite its simplicity, the table's craftsmanship stood out. It was smooth and polished, clearly handmade with care. To the east lay the heart of the camp, the training grounds. This area took up nearly 2/3 of the camp's space and was filled with an assortment of ninja-style training equipment. There were bamboo poles reminiscent of plum blossom stakes, ranging from 1 to 10 meters in height, narrow obstacle paths lined with black iron rods, humanoid wooden dummies covered in wear and tear, and more. Kaminari had asked Edge Shot the obvious question: "Did you build all this yourself?" Edge Shot's answer had been simple yet profound. "These were created by the ninjas who came before me. This camp has been passed down through generations." "Then it's like an inheritance of heroism," Kaminari had mused. Edge Shot had nodded, his voice taking on a reflective tone. "The ninja tradition has always been about passing down knowledge. Inheritance is the core of what we do." Back in the present, Edge Shot's expression remained steady as he turned to Kaminari. "It's clear that your strength far surpasses others your age. But it's not entirely due to talent." Kaminari tilted his head, curious. "Your techniques carry a refinement that can only come from hard work and dedication. That's not something you get from natural ability alone. Endeavor's son, on the other hand, is what I'd call a true genius." Edge Shot's words gave Kaminari pause. "You and Todoroki are like 2 extremes," Edge Shot continued. "One builds his strength through relentless practice, while the other relies on innate talent. Yet both of you stand far above your peers and even some professional heroes." Kaminari chuckled softly, shrugging. "Maybe it's just a case of different paths leading to the same goal. But honestly..." He trailed off for a moment, the image of Todoroki flashing through his mind. "If Todoroki worked as hard as I do, he'd probably be miles ahead of me by now," Kaminari admitted with a touch of melancholy. "Talent is a huge advantage. I can't deny that." Edge Shot regarded Kaminari quietly for a moment before speaking. "People blessed with extraordinary talent often fail to value hard work. They don't see the need for it because they can already excel without much effort. That's why so many geniuses plateau, they never learn how to push themselves further." Edge Shot's voice softened, his tone almost encouraging. "But a person who achieves greatness through hard work has a kind of talent that surpasses most others. Effort itself is a form of genius. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many mediocre people in the world." Kaminari's gaze steadied as he absorbed the hero's words. "Hard work can surpass talent," Kaminari muttered to himself, "but there are also geniuses who work hard." "That's correct," Edge Shot said, his voice carrying a note of approval. He could see the spark of determination in Kaminari's eyes, and it only deepened his admiration for the boy. "All right," Edge Shot said, breaking the momentary silence. "Go put on your combat uniform. Today, we'll begin your workplace experience for real. You'll get a taste of what it means to live the life of a professional hero." Kaminari's eyes lit up with excitement, his previous fatigue forgotten. "And if you're not too tired afterward," Edge Shot added, "you can train with me in the evening." "Yes, sir," Kaminari replied enthusiastically. Without wasting another second, he turned and headed back into his cabin. Opening his combat suit box, a faint golden glow spilled out, illuminating his face. With practiced ease, he donned the cancer's golden cloth. The dark gold flame patterns along the hem rippled like waves with his movements, while the 5 bold characters emblazoned on the back stood out, their presence commanding. Kaminari stepped out of the cabin, his eyes glinting with determination. "Let's do this." Work-study experience, here I come. Chapter 149, Decide Your Own Way of Death. As Kaminari stepped out of the wooden cabin wearing the cancer's golden cloth, the morning sun rising from the side of Mount Fuji bathed him in its gentle light. The sunlight caught the golden threads of his robe, making his entire figure shine brilliantly, as if his body had naturally activated its lighting function. At this moment, Kaminari looked almost otherworldly, like the mythical son of light. Edshot, who had turned to glance at Kaminari, froze briefly at the sight before squinting slightly and commenting with his usual calm tone, "You are a bit too conspicuous." To be fair, in his years as a professional hero, this was the first time he'd ever seen such a dazzling combat uniform. Hee, Kaminari laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his head. "It's not that bad, right? I mean, compared to Endeavor, who's literally on fire, I'm not exactly subtle but I'm not worse either." Edshot fell silent for a moment before giving a small nod. "Fair point." Without dwelling on the matter further, he turned back around and gestured forward. "Let's go. We'll catch fish and return quickly. Once we've had breakfast, we need to start morning training." As he spoke, Edshot picked up speed. His calm walk turned into a brisk jog, then a full sprint, his agile movements quickly carrying him toward the wooden walls of the camp. With a seamless leap, he tapped the top of the wall with one hand and disappeared into the forest beyond. Crackle! "Got it!" Kaminari responded energetically. A surge of golden electricity wrapped around his body, and in the next moment, he dashed after Edshot, vaulting the wall and following closely through the forest. As they raced along thick tree trunks, weaving through the lush greenery, Kaminari asked a question that had been on his mind since last night. "Sensei, can I ask what kind of training we'll be doing today?" Without breaking stride, Edshot responded, his voice steady even as he bounded forward. "We'll begin with the basics meditation." "Meditation?" Kaminari echoed, slightly confused. "You mean like, what mages use to recover mana in fantasy stories?" Edshot's expression didn't shift, but he nodded slightly. "Something like that. After all, those fantasy stories draw inspiration from the real world." He continued, "Meditation is a technique for achieving deep concentration. Through this practice, you can align your heart, mind, and body. It strengthens your mental focus and enhances your control over your body from the inside out." Kaminari listened intently as Edshot explained further. "This technique isn't unique to any one culture. It's present in nearly all martial arts disciplines. Kung Fu in China, Yoga in India, Muay Thai in Thailand each has its own version of meditative practices. These practices may differ in execution, but their essence is the same, cultivating your mind and spirit to achieve mastery over your body." Kaminari nodded thoughtfully. "I see. But..." He hesitated before asking with a wry smile, "Can this really create energy? Like magic or chakra?" "Absolutely not," Edshot said flatly, not even turning his head. "Skills are skills, they can never become something like quirks." Edshot glanced back briefly before elaborating, "I can't offer you advice on developing your quirk. That's your journey. But what I can teach you are the techniques of ninjutsu." Kaminari's eyes lit up with interest. "You've already learned the breathing technique I showed you last night. That was a foundation, a simple entry point to meditation. It allows you to recover quickly and wake instantly at any sign of danger. I'll be expanding on that." He paused before adding pointedly, "Assuming, of course, you didn't just pretend to learn it." "Pretend? Of course not." Kaminari protested with mock indignation. Then, unable to resist, he grinned and asked, "Sensei, how long did it take you to master breathing techniques?" Edshot remained silent for a few moments, seemingly pondering the question as he moved effortlessly ahead. 3 days and 3 nights, he finally admitted. "I struggled to even get started back then." "So, yes, you do have talent." 3 days? Not bad." Kaminari teased before pressing further. "What kind of ninjutsu are we talking about? Is it something cool like shadow clones or substitution techniques?" Before Edshot could answer, the forest ahead gave way to a clearing, revealing a small, tranquil lake. "We're here," Edshot said simply, landing gracefully on the ground. Kaminari followed suit, his curiosity briefly overtaken by awe as he took in the scene. The lake's surface was a deep, rich blue, perfectly reflecting the sky above. The stillness of the water gave it the appearance of a massive sapphire resting at the foot of Mount Fuji, which loomed majestically in the distance. Although they'd been here the previous evening, the atmosphere felt entirely different in the morning light. This place is... Kaminari murmured, his earlier excitement replaced with a sense of peace. Edshot, however, wasted no time. He dashed toward the lake, his movements fluid as he skimmed the surface of the water. To Kaminari, it looked as if the hero was walking on liquid glass, leaving only ripples in his wake. Though he had seen Edshot perform this water floating technique the day before, it still amazed him. He's practically gliding, Kaminari muttered. No matter how many times I see it, it's incredible. Edshot quickly returned, carrying a small makeshift box filled with water and a few fish. The box itself appeared to be folded from paper likely formed by his own quirk. We're done here. Let's head back, Edshot said simply. As they made their way back to the camp, the peaceful rhythm of their journey was interrupted. Is that someone hanging from a tree? Kaminari exclaimed, spotting a man dangling from a thick branch up ahead. His movements were wild and erratic, like a fish flailing out of water. Edshot's sharp eyes quickly assessed the situation. Without hesitation, he increased his speed and pulled out a shuriken. Whoosh! The shuriken sliced cleanly through the man's thigh, cutting him free from the branch. Thud! The man fell to the ground in a heap, coughing violently as he struggled to regain his breath. His face was red and sweaty, and it was clear that he had been moments away from suffocating. But as soon as he recovered, he looked up at Kaminari and Edshot with unfiltered anger. Why did you stop me? He yelled, his voice hoarse. Do you have any idea how much courage it took for me to do this? Kaminari blinked in disbelief. You're mad at us for saving you. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he picked up his briefcase discarded in his earlier struggle and hurled it toward them. It didn't get far, falling to the ground with a soft thud. Papers spilled out of the bag, fluttering like leaves before settling around him. Why do you care where or how I die? The man shouted, his voice filled with bitterness. It's my life, isn't it? I should get to decide how it ends. Edshot, standing on a nearby branch, sighed quietly at the display. Kaminari, still perched nearby, muttered under his breath, isn't it more strange not to stop someone from killing themselves right in front of you? He shook his head and added in exasperation, seriously, though if you are going to do this, why hike all the way out here to do it? The man glared at them, his face contorted with frustration. Because this is the one decision in my life that's mine. I've spent my whole life following orders, doing what everyone else wanted. Can't I at least decide how I go out? Chapter 150, The Meaning of Having No Door. Whoosh! As the middle-aged man in the shabby suit ranted and struggled, Edshot wasted no time. Standing on the tree trunk, he extended his paper-thin arm, effortlessly wrapping the man in long, reinforced strips of his quirk. Kaminari followed Edshot to the ground, watching the scene unfold. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, sometimes it doesn't feel like his quirk is paper, more like rubber or something. What are you doing? Let me go! The man yelled, thrashing uselessly against the restraints. You're heroes, right? You have no right to stop me. It's my personal right to commit suicide. Do you hear me? The man's outburst only grew louder and more incoherent. By the time he'd given up struggling, his breath was ragged, and he launched into a tirade of insults, lashing out at his captors. You're pathetic. Just like the rest of this system. Don't act like you care. You have no idea what it's like. None. Edshot, however, remained unfazed, calmly walking up to the restrained man. He spoke softly to Kaminari without even glancing at the furious figure. From a legal standpoint, neither the right to commit suicide nor the obligation to prevent suicide is explicitly defined. However, Edshot paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing, from the perspective of natural human rights, a person does have autonomy over their own life. By that logic, he might technically have a right to end it. Kaminari frowned, glancing between Edshot and the man. So, you agree with him? That he has the right to end things? Edshot turned slightly, fixing Kaminari with a calm but firm look. In theory, yes. But as heroes, we cannot allow it. Edshot gestured toward the restrained man. Our duty is to protect lives, no matter the circumstances. That's the responsibility we've taken on as professional heroes. If a person who can clearly be saved dies in front of us, that is a grave dereliction of duty. Kaminari fell silent, digesting the weight of Edshot's words. He repeated them softly to himself, human rights and responsibilities. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden absence of noise. He looked over at the man, only to find him glaring silently. It didn't take long to figure out why. A strip of Edshot's paper had firmly sealed the man's mouth shut. Edshot turned to Kaminari, his voice as steady as ever. Keeping him quiet will help him calm down faster. Kaminari sighed but nodded. Got it. Now, pick up the papers on the ground and put them back into his briefcase. We're taking him with us. Without further protest, Kaminari crouched down and began gathering the scattered documents. Most of the pages were covered in technical jargon and figures he didn't understand. Once they were neatly stacked and secured in the briefcase, he stood up. Let's go. Edshot leaped back onto the tree trunks, moving swiftly toward the camp while carrying the man with his extended paper limb. His speed had slowed slightly due to the added weight, but his movements were as precise as ever. As Kaminari followed closely behind, activating his high-speed movement to keep pace, his curiosity got the better of him. Why would someone come all the way out here to commit suicide? He asked, glancing at the restrained man. Edshot responded without looking back, his voice steady. This place is known as the Aokigahara Forest, or more famously, the Suicide Forest. Every year, hundreds of people come here to take their own lives. Hundreds! Kaminari exclaimed, shocked. Edshot continued, his tone measured. It all started in the 1950s with a novel called The Sea of Trees, written by Matsumoto Saiko. In the story, the protagonists choose this forest as the place to end their lives. The novel became wildly popular, and ever since, this location has drawn people with similar intentions. Kaminari fell silent, stunned by the revelation. A single book had caused such an enduring cultural phenomenon? Edshot added, my primary responsibility in this area is to patrol the forest. Sometimes it's about saving those who attempt suicide. Other times. He paused briefly. It's about recovering the remains of those we couldn't reach in time. Kaminari grimaced. He had known hero work could be grim, but hearing it laid out like this was different. How many heroes patrol the forest? He asked after a moment. There are 4 of us. Each patrols one section north, south, east, and west. I handle the west, Edshot replied. Kaminari furrowed his brow. That's it? Only 4 heroes for such a massive forest? Why doesn't the government send more help? Couldn't the police take over some of the patrol duties, at least for collecting bodies? As they reached the outer edge of the camp, Edshot came to a stop on a tree trunk. He surveyed the area ahead as he calmly addressed Kaminari's question. The government can request heroes to assist in emergencies, but they cannot force heroes to take permanent posts in certain locations. Unlike the military or police, heroes have more autonomy. Most heroes avoid this place because of the harsh conditions. There's no running water or stable electricity, and the forest is filled with insects, wild animals, and other dangers. For many, it's not worth the effort. Edshot leaped down into the camp, his landing precise and effortless. Kaminari followed shortly after, his mind still racing with questions. Once inside, Edshot set the middle-aged man down on the ground. By now, the man seemed to have lost all his earlier fire. He sat silently, his head bowed and his shoulders slumped. As for why the police can't patrol here, Edshot began, turning his gaze toward Kaminari. This forest is unlike most others. The trees are so dense that sunlight barely penetrates the canopy, making navigation difficult. Compasses don't work here due to magnetic anomalies caused by the volcanic soil. And GPS signals? They're unreliable at best. Kaminari tilted his head in disbelief. So, anyone who comes in here without proper experience would just get lost. Precisely, Edshot confirmed. With that, he began walking toward the camp's small kitchen, the fish container still in hand. He didn't glance back as he spoke over his shoulder. Don't worry about him, he said, referring to the restrained man. People who've failed a suicide attempt rarely have the courage to try again, at least not right away. Kaminari stared after him, then looked at the middle-aged man sitting on the ground. Still. He sighed and scratched the back of his head. Well, he's not exactly going anywhere. No doors to run out of here, anyway. As he glanced at the camp's towering wooden walls, the realization hit him. Wait, so that's why there's no door? He muttered, half amused. I thought it was just your ninja aesthetic. Turning back to the man, Kaminari crouched down and spoke softly, have you eaten anything today? We don't have much, but there's miso soup, rice, and some pickles to go around. He paused, then added, though, you might want to forget about the fish. Those are definitely ours. Chapter 151, Cover Kaminari reappears. The middle-aged man looked at the blonde boy in front of him with a mixture of astonishment and confusion. Kaminari, with his ever-present bright demeanor, was speaking to him as if they were old friends. And yet, despite the surreal situation, he could feel a genuine kindness radiating from the boy. After a pause, he finally spoke, his voice a quiet rasp. I don't care about food or anything. That's good. Kaminari grinned, acting as if the man's response was the most positive thing in the world. He gave a casual wave of his hand and added, all right then, let's start with some introductions. My name's Kaminari Denki, currently a student at UA High School's Hero Department. The middle-aged man hesitated, his lips pressing into a thin line. I already know who you are, he muttered. And him too. Edge shot. I saw the Hero Sports Festival, a little, anyway. But we don't know you, Kaminari said, his grin unwavering. The man's lips twitched slightly before he let out a bitter chuckle. Just a pathetic loser who failed at everything. That's all you need to know. Kaminari raised an eyebrow, his smile sharpening just a little. Hey, that's a fresh way to introduce yourself. Gotta admit, not many people would demean themselves quite like that right off the bat. I'm just being honest, the man replied grimly, his voice tightening with anger. But the anger seemed to be more at himself than at Kaminari. Then, as if something inside him broke, he suddenly straightened his posture. His tone turned resolute, though the despair in his eyes remained. I'll say this now, I'm not thanking you for saving me. I don't care what you think. The first chance I get, I'm going to try again. Kaminari didn't flinch. He folded his arms, his gaze steady. And why, exactly, are you so dead set on dying? Tell me that, at least. Come in, sit down. Let's talk. We can have this conversation while Edgeshot is grilling the fish. The man hesitated. His expression wavered between resistance and resignation. After a heavy silence, he exhaled and sat down on the ground without ceremony, his shoulders slumping. Fine, he muttered. But you're too young to understand any of this. Kaminari's expression immediately shifted to mock outrage. Hey! If you keep throwing around this age nonsense, I swear, I'll zap you. The middle-aged man blinked at the odd threat, momentarily thrown off. Then, reluctantly, he began. My name is Abe Kasuk. I work at the Nagasaki shipyard under Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. I'm a materials manager, well, a low-level one. His voice was hoarse and halting as he spoke, but he kept going, his words flowing faster with each sentence. I've been at that shipyard for 10 years. 10 years. And in all that time, I've never been promoted, not once. A year ago, we got a new department director. He transferred from headquarters. And Abe Kasuk's voice cracked, and his body began trembling. He made me an offer. A disgusting, vile offer. Kaminari stiffened. His earlier carefree demeanor faded, and his brows furrowed. He had a bad feeling about where this was going. The trembling man continued, his hands balling into fists. He said that if I let him have my wife, just one night a week, he'd use his connections to make sure I climbed the corporate ladder. Kaminari's breath hitched, but he forced himself to stay silent, letting Kasuk speak. The man gave a bitter laugh, his voice full of self-loathing. And I agreed. I agreed. For a moment, neither spoke. Kaminari struggled to process what he'd just heard. When he finally found his voice, it was softer than before. So, he kept his word? He promoted you. Kasuk nodded and gestured toward the briefcase Kaminari still held. Inside that briefcase is my promotion letter. I've already been made the head of the materials department. Next year, I'm supposed to become a section chief. Another long silence followed. Then Kaminari broke it with an exhale, one hand running through his blonde hair. So, why the suicide attempt? You got what you wanted, didn't you? At that, Kasuk's composure shattered. He let out a choked sob, his body convulsing as he buried his face in his hands. His voice cracked with anguish as he cried out. Because I can't take it anymore. I can't stand the look in my wife's eyes when she comes home. I can't stand the disgust I feel toward myself day in and day out. And the way the director looks at me, like I'm nothing but his pawn. Kaminari stared at him, his jaw tightening. Part of him wanted to feel sympathy for the man. But another part, the louder part, was disgusted. Kasuke must have noticed the change in Kaminari's expression. He looked up, his tear-streaked face twisted with desperation. You think I'm pathetic, don't you? Well. Kaminari didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, kind of. Kasuke's eyes widened, but Kaminari continued without missing a beat. But honestly, I probably despise your decision to commit suicide more than I despise the whole wife thing. And that's saying something. Kasuke blinked. What? Kaminari's voice grew sharper, more intense. If you kill yourself, what's the point of everything your wife sacrificed? All the suffering she endured for you. He crossed his arms and leaned forward slightly, his golden eyes boring into Kasuke's. By dying, you're just giving that scumbag director exactly what he wants. He gets to have his fun with your wife and get rid of you without lifting a finger. How does that not piss you off? Kasuke's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Kaminari pressed on, his words cutting like a blade. You said he already promoted you to department head, right? And he promised to make you section chief next year. Kasuke nodded weakly. Good, Kaminari said, his voice taking on a dark, almost devilish edge. Then take it. Take everything he gives you. Use his connections, use his resources, climb the ladder until you're above him. And when you're the one in power, make him suffer. Take back what's yours. Crush him. Kasuke stared at Kaminari, his eyes wide with shock and something else. Something that wasn't there before. Kaminari's grin widened. You've already thrown away your pride. Might as well use it to your advantage. Remember, the one who laughs last, wins. For a moment, the forest was silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the wind. Kasuke remained frozen, his mind racing. Slowly, his breathing steadied, and his trembling stopped. I. He stammered. Food's ready. The voice came from behind Kaminari. He turned to see Edgeshot standing at the kitchen door, his expression calm but his eyes unreadable. Kasuke remained on the ground, still processing Kaminari's words. As Kaminari headed toward the kitchen, Edgeshot watched him quietly, his thoughts unreadable. This boy. His mind is far too sharp for his age. And his methods, dangerous. But maybe, just maybe, I can help him find the right path. With that, Edgeshot disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Kaminari and Kasuke to their thoughts. Chapter 152, Twilight. In the small dining area of the kitchen, Edgeshot, Kaminari and Kasuke sat around the modest wooden table, quietly enjoying their simple Japanese breakfast. Unexpectedly, Kasuke didn't just have miso soup and rice in front of him, as Kaminari had predicted earlier. Instead, he also had a small piece of grilled fish on his plate. Kaminari's sharp eyes immediately noticed the change. Looking at the remaining fish on Edgeshot's plate, Kaminari raised an eyebrow. Wait, you shared your fish with him? Didn't expect you to have a soft side, Edgeshot. Edgeshot, still composed as always, took a sip of his warm miso soup and replied, this is simply the hospitality of a hero. His calm tone carried a deeper meaning that wasn't lost on Kaminari. Okay. You're a shining example of generosity, Kaminari teased with a grin before shifting the topic. Anyway, can you explain more about the compass failure you mentioned earlier? That part really got me curious. It's not that complicated, Edgeshot replied, setting down his bowl of soup. Basically, apart from primitive methods like following natural markers, modern reconnaissance tools don't work here. That includes compasses, satellite navigation, and radar. Hey, why though? Kaminari blinked in disbelief. The concept felt like something pulled straight out of an adventure novel, a forbidden zone of some kind. Even Kasuke, who had been quietly eating, perked up at the explanation. Edgeshot continued, his tone still level. The most common theory is that there's a high concentration of magnetite underground. This creates geomagnetic anomalies that disrupt compasses and similar devices. As for the satellites and radar, that's still unexplained, though. He paused briefly before adding, then, of course, there's the local folklore. Oh boy, here we go. Kaminari leaned back slightly, a grin tugging at his lips. Edge Shot remained unfazed. According to legend, the sheer number of deaths in this forest has led to an accumulation of resentment or evil energy. That's why people lose their way here. They say even those who don't intend to die here might eventually starve to death after getting lost. Kaminari chewed on a piece of tender grilled fish, savoring the smoky flavor before swallowing. So which explanation do you think is more reliable? Magnetite or ghosts? Neither, Edge Shot deadpanned, picking up a piece of salty radish to accompany his rice. The magnetite theory might explain the compass failure, but it doesn't account for the satellite and radar issues. And the folklore? Completely baseless nonsense. If it were true, I and the other heroes stationed here would have been dead long ago. That's fair, Kaminari nodded. He couldn't deny the logic. But if compasses and GPS don't work here, then there's still some sort of mystery, right? Something we don't fully understand yet. Edge Shot didn't respond immediately, but the weight of his words had clearly sparked Kaminari's curiosity. Eventually, Kaminari shifted his gaze toward Kasuke, who had been silently absorbing the conversation. So, if the police can't navigate this place, what's the plan for him? Kaminari asked, jerking a thumb toward the middle-aged man. Edge Shot replied without hesitation, later, during patrol, I'll take him to the edge of the forest. There's a small police station nearby specifically set up to handle situations like this. Lucky for you, hey. Kaminari teased Kasuke lightly, flashing him a smile. Kasuke nodded absently. His mind seemed elsewhere, likely replaying Kaminari's earlier words about taking revenge rather than giving up. 10 minutes later, breakfast was finished. Kasuke was given free rein to wander around the camp, with Edge Shot even taking the time to explain where the restroom was. Once that was settled, Edge Shot led Kaminari toward a section of the camp known as the bamboo pillar area. Shua! Edge Shot leaped onto a towering bamboo pole, about 10 meters high. With one foot planted firmly on the pole's tip, he slowly transitioned into a seated, cross-legged position as if balancing on thin air. Kaminari's jaw dropped. Seriously? You're just gonna casually sit like that? Edge Shot closed his eyes and spoke without breaking his balance. Now it's your turn. Stand on one of the shorter poles and use the breathing technique I taught you last night. The goal is to enter a state of meditation without falling. Don't disappoint me. Kaminari stared at the shorter pole, about a meter high, and scratched the back of his head. And, do I have to sit cross-legged too? No, Edge Shot replied flatly. Standing is sufficient. But you can't lose balance. Falling means failure. Hey, alright, here goes. Taking a deep breath, Kaminari hopped onto the bamboo pole. For a moment, he felt stable. Confident, even. This isn't so bad, he muttered to himself. But the moment he tried to focus his breathing and clear his mind, his muscles slackened involuntarily. Boom! He hit the ground. Hard. Kasuke, who had been watching from a distance, winced. That looked painful, he muttered to himself. Kaminari groaned as he rubbed his aching head. Seriously? You expect me to fall asleep while balancing on this thing? He grumbled. Edge Shot didn't respond. Kaminari glanced up and noticed the hero was already deep in meditation, completely unmoved by Kaminari's complaints. TCH, show off. Kaminari rolled his eyes and clambered back onto the bamboo pole. This time, he was determined. If he can do it, then I can do it too. No way I'm losing to some old-school ninja. He steadied himself and began regulating his breathing again. Slowly but surely, he felt the pull of sleep creeping in. Then, he heard a faint sound. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. Was that? Kaminari's eyes snapped open just as his body wobbled. Boom! He hit the ground again. But this time, Kaminari wasn't frustrated. He stood up with renewed excitement. I heard something. It sounded like rushing water. What was that? As Kaminari climbed back onto the pole for his third attempt, Edge Shot cracked open one eye, observing the boy silently. This kid. Edge Shot thought to himself. It took me over a week to sense the flow of my blood, but he's already on the verge of understanding it after just one night of practice. Edge Shot's lips curved ever so slightly into a faint smile. Impressive. Chapter 153, Quirks. Rice cakes. The so-called meditation, to put it simply, is a technique used to connect with one's inner self, what some might call the spiritual realm. Through this, individuals aim to enhance their understanding and control over their own body and mind by strengthening their spirit. However, like all skills, the effectiveness of meditation varies from person to person. While everyone possesses a spirit, their talents in harnessing it are far from equal. Some people can't even master the foundational step of breathing control, let alone achieve any significant spiritual growth. Others, gifted with extraordinary talent, might develop powerful mental abilities. These mental abilities can manifest as unique quirks, telekinesis, mental scanning, mind reading, even glimpses into the future. A prime example would be Shinso's brainwashing or Aizawa's erasure. Take Aizawa, for example. His ability to manipulate his capture weapons so deftly is a byproduct of years spent honing his quirk, to the point where his mental focus allows him to control objects almost as if with telekinesis. It took him 6 years of dedicated training to achieve this level of mastery. For someone like Edshot, whose quirk is unrelated to the spirit, achieving even basic spiritual control of the body through meditation was a monumental accomplishment. In that sense, Kaminari was in a similar position. Theoretically, he could spend years training to reach Edshot's level, perhaps even longer. Mastery of these techniques could lead to seemingly impossible feats, controlling one's body in midair when no external foothold existed, for example. But for now, Kaminari's progress remained modest. By 10 in the morning, after hours of falling repeatedly, he had only managed to barely hear the sound of his own blood flow. Dozens of falls had left him worn out and exasperated, though fortunately, his golden god robe protected him from injuries. The armor's durable alloy surface remained unscathed, and cleaning it was as simple as rinsing it with water and shaking it dry. Still, Kaminari's face betrayed his frustration. I thought the point of this was to stay awake while entering a meditative state. But as soon as I start to drift, I lose control and fall asleep completely. Hearing the sound of blood flow is great and all, but it doesn't mean anything if I can't hold on to that awareness. Isn't there any technique to help me stay conscious while meditating? He looked up at Edshot with hopeful eyes. There are no shortcuts, Edshot said flatly as he gracefully stepped down from the bamboo pillar. Landing lightly on the ground, he added, the breathing technique I taught you is the only method. Beyond that, it comes down to talent, persistence, and luck. That's how it was for me, and that's how it will be for you. Ugh, fine. Kaminari sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Edshot's progress must have been much slower. What Kaminari didn't realize was that Edshot was quietly marveling at his talent. For Kaminari to even hear the sound of his blood flow after such a short time was extraordinary. Let's move on, Edshot said, breaking the silence. We'll head out for patrol and drop him off with the police. Turning to Kasuke, Edshot continued, I'll tie you up like before to make sure you don't try anything. But this time, I won't seal your mouth. As long as you don't shout. Abe gulped nervously and nodded. Got it. Before Edshot could move, Kaminari suddenly chimed in with a grin. Hey, Kasuke-san, what's your quirk? Kasuke hesitated, looking a little embarrassed. Quirk? I haven't used it in years. Slowly, he raised his hand and focused. After a few seconds, his palm turned a soft, milky white, the surface glossy and slightly sticky. The hands, a rice cake. Kaminari's golden eyes widened slightly, his curiosity piqued. My quirk is called rice cake. It lets me turn parts of my body into something soft and sticky, like mochi. But, well. Abe looked down at his hand bitterly. Nowadays, I can only manage this with my palms. Back in school, I thought about becoming a hero, but this quirk is so useless that I gave up on that dream before I even finished middle school. A self-deprecating smile crossed his face. My quirk suits me perfectly, weak and pathetic, just like I am. But Abe failed to notice Kaminari's expression shift. For a fleeting moment, Kaminari's eyes flashed with something between shock and excitement before he quickly masked it. Transforming into mochi, hey! Kaminari thought, his mind racing. If he fully trains this quirk, he could turn his whole body into rice cakes. That's just like. Kaminari's thoughts immediately snapped to a figure from fiction, a character whose abilities matched Kasuke's potential perfectly. Charlotte Katakuri, the mochi user. At this moment, Kaminari saw an ocean of untapped potential in Kasuke. Same quirk, but completely different people. Just goes to show there's no such thing as the strongest ability, only the strongest user. Edge-shot interrupted Kaminari's thoughts. Alright, let's go. Without further warning, he wrapped Abe in his elongated paper limb, securing him like before, and leapt effortlessly over the camp's high wooden wall. As Kaminari followed closely behind, he glanced at Kosuk and said with a meaningful smile, "You know, Kosuk-san, your quirk has a lot of potential. You shouldn't underestimate it." Kosuk blinked, visibly startled by Kaminari's words. Those few simple sentences had more of an impact on him than Kaminari might have realized. For the first time in a long while, a spark of hope flickered in Abe's heart. Potential. Abe murmured quietly, repeating the word to himself. So, what else can rice cakes do, aside from being sticky? Kaminari asked as they darted through the forest. To Kaminari's surprise, Edge-shot joined the conversation. A good question. Mochi has unique properties beyond stickiness. It's flexible, durable, and can even be shaped into tools or weapons. If you think about it, the possibilities are endless. Kaminari tilted his head curiously. Edge-shot rarely engaged in casual conversation. You sound pretty interested in this topic, Edge-shot. Edge-shot's expression remained neutral, but his thoughts revealed a deeper interest. He wasn't particularly fascinated by Kosuk's quirk, rather, he was intrigued by Kaminari's sharp mind and creativity. He had read Kaminari's file and seen the sports festival, and he knew how far Kaminari had pushed a quirk as simple as electricity. If anyone could recognize the hidden potential in something as unassuming as rice cake, it was Kaminari Denki. With that in mind, Edge-shot decided to let the conversation continue, silently observing Kaminari's insights as the group moved closer to the edge of the forest. Chapter 154, Practicing Shuriken. Mr. Kosuk's quirk might not seem impressive right now, but if he can train his entire body to transform into rice cakes, there's a lot of potential for creative uses. Oh? Even if there's more rice cake, isn't it still just rice cake? Edge-shot replied without looking back, leading the way as he darted nimbly through the tree trunks. Of course, rice cakes are still rice cakes, but if used cleverly, they can have some incredible effects. For example? How many practical applications can you think of right now? Edge-shot asked curiously, glancing briefly at Kaminari, intrigued by his confidence in Abe's potential. Let's start with the basics, Kaminari began, his tone growing more enthusiastic. Shape-shifting, immunity to physical attacks, splitting the body apart, even using it for storage. Kaminari then launched into an explanation, referencing techniques inspired by Katakuri and the Mochi Mochi no Mi from his favorite manga. The unique properties of rice cake aren't limited to being sticky. It can stretch, expand, and morph, increasing the effective range of attacks by several times. And with its high stickiness, even if the user isn't as strong as their opponent, they can completely immobilize them. As for offensive capabilities, once the opponent is restrained, finishing them off is easy. For instance, just seal their mouth and nose with rice cake or worse, stuff it in and watch them suffocate. Kaminari smirked slightly at the thought, but Edge-shot didn't notice. But the tricks don't have to be complicated. A few efficient ones are more than enough. For instance, splitting the rice cake into multiple pancake-like discs for rapid strikes against the target. Or transforming your arms into rice cakes, wrapping them around a polearm, and spinning it at high speed for a devastating thrust attack, a move I like to call rice cake pounding. And that's just the beginning. Kaminari continued for nearly 20 minutes, elaborating on various combat applications, all inspired by Katakuri's techniques. By the time he finished, Edge-shot looked genuinely surprised. This kid, he should teach at UA High School. He'd make a great instructor in combat techniques, Edge-shot mused silently, impressed by how quickly Kaminari had thought up these ideas. Meanwhile Kosuk was deep in thought, absorbing every word Kaminari said like a sponge. So, I can really become that strong? He muttered to himself, his expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. But is it too late for me? I'm already so old, can I still train my quirk? This doubt lingered in his heart, even as determination began to bloom. Eventually, the group reached the edge of Aokigahara Forest, where a small police outpost stood. I've brought another one, Edge-shot, said a lean, dark-skinned police officer as he approached the group. Edge-shot nodded calmly. He's all yours. Understood. The officer returned to his desk and began typing rapidly on the computer. His efficiency made it clear that he was experienced with this sort of task. Abe Kosuk, don't give up on yourself again. Remember, the one who laughs last is the true winner, Kaminari encouraged, smiling warmly. I won't. Kosuk replied with conviction, his demeanor surprising both Kaminari and Edgeshot. Maybe it's the kind of epiphany that comes after a brush with death, Edgeshot thought, though he didn't dwell on it. Over the years, he'd saved many people, few of whom he ever saw again. Kaminari, could I get your contact information? Kosuk suddenly asked, catching Kaminari off guard. After a moment of thought, Kaminari nodded. Sure, but on one condition: when you surpass your limits, come find me and tell me that you've won. Yes. Kosuk shouted, determination radiating from his voice. Edgeshot couldn't help but think, it feels like Kaminari's teaching him how to become a villain. But he let it slide. After all, Kaminari wasn't someone like All Might who'd give long, preachy lectures. It's all set. We'll take him from here and make sure he gets home safely, the officer said. All right. Edgeshot turned and headed for the exit. Kaminari said a quick goodbye to Abe Kosuk before following. Kaminari-san, thank you for giving me a second chance at life. Kosuk called after him. From now on, I'll climb to the top, no matter what it takes. He vowed silently, a fire burning in his eyes. From this moment, the old Kosuk had truly died. As they walked away, Edgeshot began explaining the plan to Kaminari. For the next few days, I'll teach you how to move through the forest during patrols. Observe carefully and learn everything you can. By the final day, I expect you to complete a patrol on your own. Kaminari's face lit up with excitement. The opportunity to learn these practical skills was invaluable to him. Don't worry. I won't slack off. Good. Edgeshot then began leading Kaminari through his assigned patrol route, demonstrating everything step by step. He didn't just teach forest navigation or survival techniques, he also covered advanced skills like ambushing, tracking, and intercepting targets. The breadth of knowledge left Kaminari both amazed and thrilled. When Edgeshot pulled out a few shurikens and announced that he'd teach him the basics of shuriken techniques that evening, Kaminari could barely contain his excitement. If I can master throwing shurikens like Uchiha Ataki, I could create a lightning-enhanced version of his attacks. Kaminari thought, his mind racing. He eagerly began asking Edgeshot about the possibility of replicating the advanced shuriken techniques he'd seen in Naruto. You're saying you want to make shurikens collide mid-air to change trajectory? Or throw them from blind spots to hit a moving target? Or create a technique where the shurikens are completely unavoidable? Edgeshot was momentarily stunned. These ideas sounded ridiculous, but the more he thought about them, the more plausible they seemed. Can you do it? Kaminari asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Edgeshot scratched his head awkwardly. I've never tried anything like that before. For a moment, he felt embarrassed. After all his years of practicing ninjutsu, he hadn't even considered these possibilities. Maybe I should have asked my master about this back when he was alive, Edgeshot thought, suddenly feeling the urge to revisit his old training. But for now, he needed to manage the eager boy in front of him. All right, I'll look into it, Edgeshot said, slightly flustered. Kaminari grinned. If you can do it, then I'll definitely learn it. Edgeshot sighed inwardly. I've been training for years, and now I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of shuriken techniques. What a failure. Determined to rise to the challenge, Edgeshot resolved to delve deeper into shuriken techniques once they returned. Let's start with the basics for tonight. Chapter 155, Animals Also Have Quirks. Motivated by the idea of mastering the shuriken technique, Edgeshot's movements during the next patrol became faster and more precise, and he spoke far less. Trailing behind him, Kaminari couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. It seems this guy is a true ninja fanatic. Should I just tell him about all the ninja techniques that might suit him? Even though he doesn't have chakra, he could probably pull off physical techniques like the 1000 Years of Death, Shadow of the Dancing Leaf, or the Front Lotus, right? Kaminari's thoughts raced. Oh, and there's also a solo version of Fang over Fang, he could call it Paper Fang. By transforming his limbs into paper and spinning at high speed, he'd nail it. To his credit, Edgeshot wasn't wrong, Kaminari really did have a knack for thinking up special moves, making him a natural for the role of combat tactics instructor at UA. Hi. However, Kaminari's good mood was cut short when they stumbled upon the corpses of two people who had committed suicide. A man and a woman were embracing each other on the ground, two empty glass vials beside them. It looks like they took poison and passed away last night, Ed Shot said flatly, examining the bodies before estimating their time of death. What now? Kaminari asked, his golden brows furrowing. We bring them to the police station. It doesn't just handle rescued individuals, it also takes care of the deceased, Ed Shot explained, his voice calm but firm. Kaminari felt his chest tighten. A sense of foreboding crept over him. Wait, how are we supposed to carry them? His voice trembled slightly. To be honest, he wanted nothing more than to bolt from the scene. Each of us takes one, Ed Shot replied without hesitation. Kaminari froze. He was only 15, after all, and the thought of carrying a cold, lifeless body horrified him. But Ed Shot, seasoned by years of hero work, didn't even consider how terrifying such an experience might be for someone so young. Still, as a student in U.A.'s hero course, Kaminari had volunteered for this path. Ed Shot believed it was important for him to understand and accept the darker aspects of being a hero. After a moment, Kaminari hesitantly asked, do I have to carry it, or just bring it along with me? Ed Shot shot him a curious glance before nodding. Fine, Kaminari exhaled, relieved that he wouldn't have to physically touch the body. Removing his cancer's golden cloth, he generated a thin layer of electricity to cover it. The cloak floated into the air with a soft hum, carried by Kaminari's electricity. He carefully positioned it under the female corpse and used the floating robe to lift her gently. Ed Shot watched in surprise. So, that's an option too, hey? He didn't comment further, though, since Kaminari's method preserved the dignity of the body. With that, Ed Shot transformed his right arm into paper and used it to securely wrap around the male corpse. Let's go, Ed Shot said curtly before leaping into action. He darted through the trees effortlessly, making his way back to the police station. Kaminari followed close behind, marveling at how easily Ed Shot carried the body with one arm. No wonder he's so fast and skilled, he's not just nimble, he's ridiculously strong too, Kaminari thought. I need to work on my physical strength as well. I can't rely solely on my electricity. If my power ever runs out, I'd be completely helpless. When they arrived at the police station, Kaminari noticed that Kasuke was gone. After asking around, he learned that Kasuke had already been escorted home by a police car. Without lingering, they handed the bodies over to the officers and once again vanished into the vast forest. Kaminari sterilized his cancer's golden cloth with a surge of heat from his electricity, then let it float behind him to cool off. I think I understand now why professional heroes don't want to take this post, Kaminari muttered, breaking the silence as they walked. Dealing with corpses every day, no normal person could handle this, right? Heroes are heroes because they endure pressure that ordinary people can't, Ed Shot replied without looking back. Stop thinking like a civilian. Yet. I guess you're right, Kaminari mumbled reluctantly. The rest of the patrol passed without incident, though they did encounter plenty of wild animals. Watching the boars and deer wander about, Kaminari's thoughts drifted back to the grandfather and grandson he'd met earlier. Is there really a 3-meter-tall bear in this forest? He suddenly asked. Ed Shot turned his head slightly, surprised. Despite the movement, his steps remained steady and precise. A 3-meter-tall bear? How do you know about that? Kaminari's eyes widened at his reaction. Wait, it's real. He quickly recounted the Magi hunter's story about the massive bear. Ed Shot frowned thoughtfully before replying, if they were headed south, then it makes sense. 2 months ago, a giant bear attacked a village in the southern part of the forest. But for certain reasons, it wasn't widely reported. Certain reasons? Kaminari asked, confused. Ed Shot nodded solemnly. The bear isn't 3 meters tall. It's 5 meters tall. To avoid widespread panic, the official reports understated its size. 5 meters. That's as tall as a 2-story building. Kaminari exclaimed, struggling to comprehend the enormity of such a creature. How can an animal get that big? Why not? Humans are animals too, and we've got giants among us, Ed Shot replied matter-of-factly. But that's because of quirks. Wait, Kaminari froze, his eyes widening. Are you saying animals can have quirks too? Ed Shot nodded again. They're rare, but animals with quirks do exist. That bear isn't just huge, it's fast, strong, and its hide is so tough that bullets can't penetrate it. That's why the hero stationed in the south, Cheetah, ended up with 3 broken ribs while trying to take it down. Kaminari stood there stunned, trying to process this information. At the same time, he silently prayed for the grandfather and grandson he'd met earlier, hoping they wouldn't run into the bear. Better yet, he thought to himself, I hope I don't run into it either. Leave the giant bear and its quirk to the professionals. I'm just a 15-year-old kid, I don't need to get involved. Chapter 156, Radar. At 4 in the afternoon, the day's patrol officially ended, and Edge Shot managed to shoot 2 rabbits during their return. Without wasting time, he carried the rabbits straight into the kitchen. Hey? Do we really need to start dinner this early? Kaminari asked from the kitchen doorway, watching Edge Shot wash his hands. He remembered that dinner had been served at 6 the previous evening. From now on, eat as quickly as you can. I'll teach you the shuriken technique during dinner. Edge Shot replied quietly, keeping his focus on preparing the rabbits. All right. Kaminari understood his eagerness to teach the shuriken technique. It was clear Edge Shot's impatience stemmed from his passion for ninjutsu. You should head to the bamboo poles and keep practicing your meditation. I'll call you when it's ready. Got it, Kaminari nodded before walking away from the kitchen. Watching someone butcher rabbits wasn't his idea of a good time anyway. With a quick leap, Kaminari landed lightly on the narrow bamboo pole, balancing on one foot. Closing his eyes, he focused on his breathing, slowing it down in rhythm. Thud. Before long, he lost balance and fell. But Kaminari said nothing, didn't even brush the dirt off his clothes, and immediately climbed back onto the bamboo pole. Thud. 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 It happened again and again, he would hear the sound of blood rushing in his ears, but he'd lose focus and fall. Yet, Kaminari kept going without a word, silently persevering. By the time Edge Shot called him 40 minutes later for dinner, Kaminari's face was covered in dirt, and his cancer's golden cloth looked even darker from all the dust. You'd better wash up first. There's no way I'm letting you into the kitchen looking like that, Edge Shot said, shaking his head before turning back to the kitchen to focus on his shuriken training plans. In the small bathroom of Kaminari's wooden cabin, warm water ran down his body, filling the room with steam. Kaminari stood beneath the shower head, deep in thought. Why am I not making progress? Am I not practicing enough, or is this just a limitation of my natural talent when it comes to spiritual techniques? His mind kept replaying Edge Shot's instructions. He said the next step after hearing blood flow is to sense the trembling of your muscles. But muscles don't move on their own, it must be the nerves moving them. So what I really need to sense is the subtle vibrations of my nerves. But normal nerve tremors are so faint that they're practically impossible to detect. That's why countless hours of meditation are necessary, to gradually strengthen your mind until, one day, you can finally sense those faint nerve tremors. Kaminari's golden eyes suddenly opened, and a strange glint flickered in them. But those steps are for normal people, people who can only cultivate their spirit indirectly. I'm not normal. I can accelerate the conduction speed of my nerves using electricity, forcing them to move artificially. If I combine that with meditation, it should work. Kaminari's face lit up with determination. Turning off the shower, he used a quick burst of electricity to evaporate the water on his body. In an instant, he was dry. Bam! Throwing on his clothes, he kicked open the door and ignored the tantalizing smell of roasted rabbit wafting through the air. Instead, he headed straight for the bamboo poles. Edge Shot heard the commotion and stepped out of the kitchen, raising an eyebrow as he saw Kaminari leaping onto the bamboo pole again. He didn't ask any questions or insist Kaminari join him for dinner, something about the boy's demeanor stopped him. Kaminari was clearly in an unusual state of focus. And then it happened. KZZZZZT. Kaminari entered a familiar high-voltage state, golden electricity crackling around his body. The cancer's golden cloth sparkled brightly, glowing under the electric currents as though it had been equipped with its own lighting system. Meanwhile, Kaminari's excitement soared. He heard it, something different from the sound of blood flow. It was faint, like a heartbeat, but quieter and more numerous. Not enough. The nerve conduction speed is still too slow. High voltage mode activate. KRAK boom. Golden light exploded from Kaminari's body, intensifying the electricity coursing through him. The previously scattered currents coalesced, forming radiant flames that rose around him. His blonde hair stood on end, shimmering like metallic blades. There it is. He heard it countless tiny drum beats. It was the sound of his nerves trembling throughout his body. Wait, why haven't I fallen asleep yet? Kaminari suddenly realized. Then it hit him. It's the sounds, the rushing, rhythmic sounds are keeping me awake. But my body, under the influence of the breathing technique, it's already entered a deep sleep-like state. This is incredible. It feels like I'm observing the real world from inside a dream. Edgeshot watched from the sidelines, his jaw slightly slack. What the hell is this? I practiced for half a year just to reach this level, and this kid manages it in 2 days. Master always said I was a ninjutsu genius, but what does that make this kid? Edgeshot wasn't one to feel envious, but this was pushing him to his limits. He quickly collected himself, though, and began observing Kaminari more carefully. No, he didn't rely solely on his own senses to enter this state. He's using his quirk to force it. But Kaminari's quirk is electricity, or does he have some kind of spiritual ability hidden in there? Meanwhile, Kaminari made another discovery. Wait, what's this? He noticed invisible ripples radiating outward from his body. They should have been imperceptible, but in his current state, he could sense them clearly. They look like magnetic field lines. His studies with Momo on electromagnetics suddenly came to mind, and the knowledge clicked into place. It is a magnetic field. These ripples are magnetic fields generated by the high-voltage electricity running through my body. In this state, I can actually perceive the presence of magnetic fields. His thoughts raced. If he could feel his own magnetic field, could he extend his awareness to detect the fields of other people or objects? By emitting weak radio waves, he might be able to sense everything around him. In theory, every object has a magnetic field. But right now, I can only sense larger ones, like those produced by living beings. Kaminari tested his hypothesis by actively spreading faint radio waves outward. Soon enough, he detected a significant magnetic field about 15 meters away. I can't believe it. The combination of meditation and radio waves has created something like a radar. Chapter 157, First Hands with Shuriken. Thinking about his newfound radar ability, Kaminari couldn't help but recall the technique used by Enel, the thunder god from One Piece. That technique, which combined radio waves and observation haki, allowed Enel to detect movements and even eavesdrop over vast distances. Seems like I should try figuring that out too. He reflected further. Sensing other people's positions and movements using radio waves is already doable. The next step is just practice to improve precision. But then another problem came to mind. What about hearing distant sounds? My body isn't like Enel's, and I can't automatically convert radio waves into sound waves. After all, I'm a lightning-type person, not some all-powerful deity. This question puzzled him for a while, but eventually, he let it go. Just being able to detect nearby people was already a huge step forward. He had time to work on it later. For now, though, I can only activate this radar when I'm in a meditative state. I'll have to figure out a way to keep it running constantly. Otherwise, it's not as useful as it could be, it only really shine during rescue missions. Muttering to himself, Kaminari hopped down from the bamboo pole, lost in thought, and slowly walked toward the kitchen. Edgeshot, noticing Kaminari's contemplative expression, suppressed his curiosity and decided not to press him for answers. They sat in silence as they ate dinner. By the time the 2 roasted rabbits had been reduced to nothing but bones, Edgeshot finally broke the silence. Did you achieve samadhi? Yes. I think I've completed the state of entering concentration you mentioned, Kaminari replied while wiping his mouth with a napkin. But it seems I can only hear and feel. I can't interact with my surroundings the way you can. Can I ask how you did it? Of course. It's actually pretty simple. Kaminari explained his method in a straightforward manner, describing how he used electric current to speed up nerve conduction. That kind of training method, it probably only works for lightning-type quirks like yours, right? Edgeshot asked, a note of disappointment in his voice. He had been hoping Kaminari had stumbled upon a universal technique. Probably, Kaminari admitted with a shrug, but I can let you experience it. Who knows? Speeding up your nerve conduction might deepen your understanding of meditation. Oh! Edgeshot's eyes lit up, and his mind flashed back to Kaminari's performance during the UA Sports Festival, specifically the cavalry battle where Kaminari had used his electricity to temporarily enhance his teammates' speed. Now that I think about it, you've done something like this before, using your electricity to boost others' reaction speed, right? Exactly, Kaminari replied with a smile, placing his empty teacup on the table. Electricity can stimulate the body's functions and enhance performance temporarily. In that case, let's start practicing right away. Excitement surged through Ed's shot as he stood up abruptly, grabbing his dishes and walking out of the small dining area. Even with his face hidden by a mask, his eagerness was clear from his body language. Between the prospect of learning shuriken techniques and possibly advancing his meditation, Ed's shot felt like he had been transported back to his youth, when he was still learning ninjutsu under his master's guidance. Back then, every day had been filled with the thrill of discovery. Kaminari's presence brought that feeling back, and Ed's shot couldn't help but feel a growing fondness for his student. This kid isn't like the others I've trained. Not only does he absorb what I teach him, but he also gives back, sharing knowledge and techniques I'd never considered before. As they washed the dishes together, Ed's shot chuckled to himself. Then Kaminari's earlier mention of the word master came to mind. Maybe I should think about taking him as a disciple. But wait, I'm only 30. After cleaning up, the two of them left the kitchen and headed to the open training area. This time, however, they didn't go to the bamboo poles. Aren't we continuing with meditation? Kaminari asked, glancing toward the row of wooden stakes in the distance. Not yet, Ed's shot replied calmly. First, I'll teach you the basics of hidden weapon techniques. Once you've grasped the fundamentals, you can practice while meditating. Ed's shot reached into his clothes and pulled out 4 shurikens, holding them deftly between the fingers of his right hand. These are star-shaped shurikens, a common type. While there are many other designs, we'll focus on the star shape for now. Kaminari studied the black shurikens carefully. They were exactly like the ones he had seen in Naruto. I'll demonstrate first. Watch my hand movements closely. Ed's shot flicked his wrist, sending the first shuriken flying through the air. It sliced through the air with a soft whoosh, followed by the second, third, and fourth in rapid succession. Thud. 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 Each shuriken embedded itself in the center of a wooden stake. The placements were so precise that they looked identical. How much of that did you catch? Kaminari scratched his head awkwardly. Not much, your movements were so fast that it looked like you only moved your hand 3 times. Then his eyes lit up with an idea. He ran over to the wooden stakes, pulled out the shurikens, and handed them back to Ed's shot. Do it again. This time, I'll record it. Record it. Ed's shot raised an eyebrow in confusion. Kaminari grinned and looked down at his cancer's golden cloth. Pikachu. Yes, master, the robe replied in a high-pitched, childlike voice, leaving Ed's shot visibly stunned. When the paper sharpshooter demonstrates the shuriken technique, record his movements in detail, Kaminari instructed. Understood, sir. Kaminari turned back to Ed's shot with a satisfied smile. Please, go ahead. Ed's shot didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The fact that Kaminari's combat uniform had artificial intelligence was impressive but unexpected, especially for a student. Fine, Ed's shot said. This time, I'll break down the movements step by step while demonstrating. When throwing, lower your hand slightly like this, he explained, showing the proper angle. And when you release the shuriken, make sure your hand is accelerating through the throw. Watch closely. Whoosh. Thud. After another perfect throw, Ed's shot handed Kaminari a shuriken. Your turn. Let me show you how to hold it properly. Once you've got the basics down, all that's left is practice. Got it. Kaminari eagerly took the star-shaped shuriken, turning it over in his hands to feel its weight and texture. As he stared at the weapon in his hand, he felt a surge of excitement. I can't believe it. I'm actually holding a real shuriken. Chapter 158, Paper Arts? The camp was quiet, save for the hum of Kaminari's electricity and the sharp thud of shurikens hitting wooden stakes. Occasionally, the cool breeze rolling down from Mount Fuji would rustle through the area, carrying with it a peaceful stillness. As the sky darkened and the moon illuminated the scenery, creating a serene and beautiful atmosphere, Kaminari's mood was anything but serene. For one, the dimming light made it harder to aim at the wooden stakes. And second, the repetitive practice had become excruciatingly dull. Not only was he throwing shurikens over and over again, but after each round, he had to jog over to the stakes to retrieve the 4 shurikens. Earlier, Kaminari had asked Ed's shot if he could use more shurikens to avoid all the back and forth, but the answer he received left him speechless. There are plenty of shurikens, but I won't give them to you. This way, you'll cherish every throw. Kaminari understood the reasoning. Edge shot wasn't talking about cherishing the physical shurikens themselves, but rather valuing the precision, form, and focus behind each throw. The quickest way to reduce the tedious trips to retrieve them was to sharpen his skills and perfect the fundamental movements as soon as possible. With this in mind, Kaminari shifted his attitude, much like he had back when he practiced micromanipulations of his electricity in the depths of Omiya Park. If I can't hit the mark after 10 throws, then I'll try 100. If I can't do it after 100, then I'll do it 1,000. I'm sure even a genius like Itachi Uchiha had to practice countless times before achieving mastery of his shuriken techniques. Resolute, Kaminari continued to throw with unwavering focus, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Under the moonlight, the faint glimmer of sweat reflected the cold silver glow. On the other side of the camp, Edge shot, now wrapped in golden electricity thanks to Kaminari's high voltage boost, had entered a mysterious and heightened state of stillness. This time, however, the clarity he experienced wasn't internal but external. Over the years, Edge shot had refined his internal awareness to the point of near perfection, achieving a level where he could manipulate his body through sheer mental focus without needing to close his eyes. But now, thanks to the external amplification of his spirit through the high voltage current, he could sense the world around him in ways he never thought possible. I can see it. I can see every movement, the mosquito's flight patterns, the breeze as it flows past, even the grains of sand shifting on the ground. No, that's not right. It's not seeing. This world has no color or shape, it's all vibrations. I'm sensing the vibrations. This feeling, it must be awareness. However, a lingering question bothered him: could this state only be achieved in the activated condition, with Kaminari's electricity enhancing him? If that was the case, it was a problem. He couldn't rely on Kaminari to be by his side 24/7, acting as a personal power source. I have to master this ability on my own. Even so, Edge shot couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. He had stumbled upon a level of meditation that surpassed anything his predecessors had reached, even his own master. This must be what Eraser had called spiritual projection. At first, I thought it only applied to him because of his unique quirk. But my situation is different, it's purely sensory. I can't affect external objects, I can only detect them. And the range isn't very large, maybe a 3-meter radius at best. He sighed inwardly, returning to the same question: how could he practice this on his own? Bzzzt. The electricity wrapped around him began to dissipate as the high-speed activation wore off. Edge shot realized the world he had been sensing was fading rapidly, slipping into darkness as the connection to his surroundings broke off. For a brief moment, an inexplicable discomfort settled over him. Then, with some reluctance, he opened his eyes and returned to reality. Kaminari Denki. His eyes landed on Kaminari in the distance, who was silently practicing his shuriken throws. Thank you. Thank you for helping me see a new world. Standing tall atop a 10-meter-high bamboo pole, Edge shot gazed at the glowing moon overhead, his heart swelling with determination. Master, he whispered, I've made my decision. I will take him as my disciple. A cool night wind swept through the camp, causing his uniform ribbons to flutter in the breeze. Below him, the soft sounds of shurikens embedding into wooden stakes blended with the rustling bamboo and the silver glow of the moonlight. The night, the serene setting, and the two figures practicing side by side formed a strikingly picturesque moment. The days that followed blurred together into a routine. Wake up. Breakfast. Meditation. Patrol. Dinner. Practice. Again and again. Time moved steadily but surely, with Kaminari and Edge shot growing and evolving under the shadow of the mighty Mount Fuji. Finally, the morning of the 6th day arrived. Kaminari, today is the last day, Edge shot said calmly over breakfast. As per our agreement, you'll patrol alone today. The breakfast was the same as usual: grilled fish, miso soup, rice, and pickles. Yes, I'm ready. What about you? Kaminari asked, nodding while glancing curiously at his now official master. 3 days ago, Edge shot had casually asked Kaminari if he'd like to become his disciple. Kaminari had agreed without hesitation, and that was that: no grand ceremony, just a simple exchange of words. As part of this informal pact, Kaminari had received 4 additional star-shaped shurikens and a standard kunao. I'll stay here. I've made progress on that move, Edge shot replied, a flicker of excitement in his usually composed voice. Kaminari's heart skipped a beat. He knew exactly what that move referred to. After Kaminari had mastered the basics of shuriken throwing, Edge Shot had told him to aim directly at him and throw with full force while he stood with his back turned, eyes closed. At the time, Edge Shot had been wrapped in Kaminari's high-voltage current, yet the result had left Kaminari speechless. For half an hour, Edge Shot barely moved, dodging every single shuriken with subtle, precise shifts. At first, Kaminari had doubted his own skills, but Edge Shot explained the process. 3 terms immediately popped into Kaminari's mind. Paper arts? Or observation haki? If I can master this ability, Edge Shot had said with a smile, I'll completely counter number 3 Hero Hawks. Why number 3? Shouldn't your first target be number 4, Best Genist? Kaminari had asked, puzzled. Logically, number 5 should aim to surpass number 4 first. At the time, Edge Shot's face darkened. Have you finished eating? If so, get outside and practice your meditation. He had snapped. Chapter 159, Beneath. Kaminari, despite finding Edge Shot's attitude puzzling at times, didn't press for answers. Instead, he quietly cleaned the dishes and then climbed back onto the bamboo pole for another round of meditation. Taking a deep breath, he began to regulate his breathing with the practiced precision of the breathing method. Slowly, his eyes closed, and his body entered a state of calm. Godspeed, activate. Bzzzt. Golden electricity surged around Kaminari's body, dancing across his form like living currents. The cancer's golden cloth fluttered in the breeze, and with Mount Fuji towering in the distance, Kaminari cut a striking figure, exuding power and confidence. It's happening again, Kaminari murmured to himself as his surroundings shifted. This was the black and white world he had come to associate with his radar, a world where magnetic fields dictated his perception. No matter how many times he entered this state, it never failed to leave him in awe. Unlike his initial attempts, where he needed to use high-voltage electricity to sense magnetic fields, his continuous practice over the past few days had refined his skills. Now, high-speed movement alone was enough to trigger the radar effect. But even so, there were still limitations. I still can't sense these magnetic fields while my eyes are open. And I'm nowhere near the level of master, who can move while maintaining this spiritual state, let alone use his spirit to actively influence his body. For now, the radar only worked when he was stationary. That much was clear. After all, it had only been 6 days. No matter how talented he was, it would be impossible to bridge the gap between himself and someone as experienced as Edge Shot in such a short time. Still, he couldn't help but find the radar frustratingly impractical. I really envy Master. His level of meditation allows him to stay active while remaining spiritually focused. Meanwhile, I'm stuck standing still if I want to use this ability. Does this mean I need to improve my meditation before I can use radar in actual combat? Looking at his current progress, Kaminari grimaced. It could take years to reach Edge Shot's level of spiritual discipline, and that timeline didn't sit well with him. I need to figure out a way to attack and defend even while standing still. Vision wasn't a problem. His radar allowed him to perceive everything around him in a way that surpassed the limitations of sight. But the lack of mobility made him vulnerable. Attack and defend, while standing still. Kaminari repeated the thought over and over, letting the words turn in his mind like a mantra. Minutes stretched into over half an hour as he pondered, searching for inspiration. And then, like a light bulb flickering to life, his thoughts coalesced into a single clear image. Gaara of the Sand. The figure in his mind was unmistakable, the Kazekage surrounded by swirling sands, capable of defending and attacking without moving a muscle. Gaara is the perfect example of someone who can stand still and fight at the same time. But he used special sand infused with his mother's wool. Could I replicate that? Wait, maybe I can. In his mind's eye, the image of Gaara shifted to the left, and another figure materialized on the right, a girl with short brown hair, crackling with blue electricity. Misaka Mikoto. This version of Misaka Mikoto was different from how she usually appeared in Kaminari's thoughts. Instead of firing her iconic railgun, she stood calmly, her hands at her sides, surrounded by a swirling tornado of black iron sand. Are you telling me to use iron sand instead of yellow sand? Kaminari murmured as he studied the image of Mikoto smiling confidently at him, as if she were both a teacher and a friend. Because he was in a meditative state, the figures in his mind felt vivid and lifelike. The sands around Gaara, the electricity sparking around Mikoto, and the iron sand tornado all seemed to pulse with energy, as if alive. It was no longer just an idle thought, his mental landscape had shifted into something dynamic, vibrant, and interactive. Without realizing it, Kaminari's mind conjured a third figure to join the two. This time, it was him, Kaminari Denki, clad in his cancer's golden cloth, standing confidently opposite the other two. This spiritual world is fascinating. Kaminari thought, his excitement bubbling as he mentally controlled his avatar to approach Mikoto. As his mental projection playfully touched Mikoto's face, a grin spread across his real one. I can't believe it. I actually get to meet Misaka Mikoto. For a moment, Kaminari felt like a kid living out his childhood dreams as a fan of anime. Then, a new idea sparked in his mind. Wait a second. If I could manipulate this mental space further, and somehow drag an opponent's spirit into it, wouldn't that be like an illusion technique? I could trap, harm, or even defeat them here. But the practicality of the idea stopped him. How would I even pull someone's spirit into this space? Kaminari pondered the question briefly before realizing he had gone completely off track. No. I need to focus on solving the problem of standing still and defending myself first. I can think about this illusion idea later, if it's even possible. He redirected his attention to the iron sand tornado surrounding Mikoto in his mind. Iron sand, she collected it from the soil, didn't she? Kaminari tried shifting the focus of his radar from scanning the horizontal plane to scanning vertically, specifically the ground beneath him. Whoa! In his black and white world, the ground below him lit up with countless white specks that looked like glimmering snow. Are these iron sand particles? But there's so much of it. He stared in awe at the sheer density of the iron sand. The soil beneath his feet seemed saturated with it. Suddenly, Kaminari remembered something Edgeshot had mentioned earlier. There's a massive amount of magnetite beneath the Aokigahara Sea of trees, Edgeshot had said. Ah, that explains it. That's why there's so much iron sand here.
Thanks for listening.